All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I'm David Kaplan. I'm the chair of the Alexandria Transit Company's Board of Directors, and welcome to our June meeting. I'm going to ask our board secretary to go ahead and call the roll.
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair Kleist. Linda Bailey. Randy Collins. Here. Kendall Taylor. Matt Harris.
Here.
Hillary Orr. Here. Ajasha Thomas.
Present.
Murat Omey.
Here.
Jesse O'Connell.
Here.
Okay, Chair Kaplan, you have a quorum. We have 7 members present.
Thank you, and I'll note that our vice chair has an excused absence. He's traveling for work. Ms. Bailey has a work conflict. Kendall is going to be joining us remotely. She's actually flying from Texas back to DC, so she'll be on as soon as she lands and gets back either to her home or her office. So thank you, Madam Secretary. I welcome 2 new members. Let's go back to the board member picture for a moment, because you'll see there are some changes here. And wow, we already got pictures of you up. This is Jesse O'Connell and Murat Omey. I want to welcome you on behalf of the board. You were appointed unanimously by the City Council acting as stockholders on May 24th. We all had a chance to review and discuss your applications, and we're delighted to have your expertise as part of the board. In September, when we have a lighter agenda, I want to do a little icebreaker exercise similar to what some of you may remember. We did kind of a prompt. We talked about either something that motivated us about transit or something we've been doing during pandemic shutdowns. And so we'll do that again in September so you get to know us a little better. But I wanted to give you both just an opportunity just to share, your brief elevator speech, if you will, or kind of what brings you to the board, just so we know a little bit more about you. So I'm putting you on the spot because I didn't have your email addresses before tonight, so I didn't have a chance to let you know I was going to do this. But I would like to just hear from you.
No, go ahead, please. You have more great.
I know I'm more than exactly. That's it. Thank you so much, guys. It's great to be here, and I apologize that I'm not fully addressing the room. Jesse O'Connell. I'm a resident of Delray. I have 2 small children. I have a 3rd grader and a kindergartner. I do education policy professionally. I work for the Center for American Progress and lead their higher education, K-12 and early ed policy, which recently has had increasing intersections with transit access, transit availability, particularly when it comes to community college students and when they're accessing classes. So it's an issue that I've become more aware of in my professional life, as well as connections to seeing how people move around the city. And then I've been very involved in Alexandria for some time. I chaired the Budget and Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission. I was on the Parks and Rec Commission, and I've been involved in various sort of neighborhood level planning groups at North Old Town and a couple others. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to learn more about Dash and to provide assistance however I can.
Hello, everyone. So for the record, name is Murat. It's got like this hard U and R in there, Murat Omey, and I'm happy to be part of the board. And professionally, I work for the Office of the Secretary of Transportation, and I have a specific role in the Intelligent Transportation Systems Joint Program Office. I've been a transportation guy for the last 25 years of my career, anywhere from traffic engineering to transportation planning to intelligent transportation systems. And my previous responsibility was with the Federal Transit Administration for the last 5 years. So I do know a little bit about transit as well. I am a fairly recent resident of Alexandria, and I used to live in Columbia, Maryland, and my lovely fiance, she's also in the crowd over there. She she forced me to live here, not him. So she actually encouraged and convinced me to live here for the last 4 years, and I think it is very exciting to look at what's going on in my quote unquote backyard as far as transit and transportation or any activity. So I'm also serving on the Transportation Commission, I think by appointment. So that's also going to be excited. So I'm a public servant, and I'm glad to be a volunteer public servant here as part of the board.
And you also were the Riders Advisory Committee that is fairly new. That Dash
That's
created.
also
You were
true,
a
yes.
Vice chair of that committee, which I think was something that we all appreciated. Now actually having people who had been serving in that advisory role and now wanting to come and make policy for the board.
That's
So,
true. Actually,
that's
that was a nice conduit. Actually,
Yeah.
seeing how things were evolving and what the issues were and what the topics were and everything actually kind of piqued my interest as well to serve on this board.
That's great. And we always are looking for new members of that committee. So if that's something that folks in the audience are interested in getting more involved from the rider perspective, you can talk to any of the staff that are here. They can help you get an application and get involved in that. And Hillary, in terms of getting on the Transportation Commission, he'll be able to start attending in the.
Oh, yeah, he's already received an email and orientation packet.
Okay, that's great. And both Jesse and Mert, I understand we'll have you over for the facility tour very shortly, so you can see the kind of behind the scenes of our operations and get to know the Dash leadership team as well. Speaking of our Dash leadership, you'll see Josh on the screen tonight. Our general manager is he's waving. Way back, is unfortunately not able to join us, and we appreciate having Raymond Mui in the room, our assistant general manager, who's keeping things running here and keeping us on task. But Josh will be participating in the meeting fully from his home. All right, with that out of the way, I'm going to take a couple of things out of order, which is some special recognition that was originally under 4A and 4B. I'm going to start with the Virginia Transit Association Awards. So there are two awards that I want to recognize, and I know our marketing team is here, and Mr. Jones is here as well in the back. I'll start with the marketing team. So the Virginia Transit Association had its 2022 annual conference and expo in Roanoke, Virginia. It was on June 1st and June 2nd. And Dash was recognized by the association for its outstanding work during the launch of the new Dash network during September 2021. And that's the Marketing and Community Outreach Award. And then Mr. Jones received an award as a stellar employee for, it's called the Unsung Heroes Award. And so you both loaned me your certificates to show off. And so Mr. Jones, do you want to come up? Yeah. We actually have some pictures of you in our board packet receiving the award. I don't know if anyone manning the PowerPoint can go to that slide just so they can see what it looked like there on June 1st and June 2nd. But okay, well, maybe not. I'm going to try to bring it up on my left. But okay, they're going towards now. Okay, there's Mr. Jones receiving his award. And so, Javon, I want to recognize you for the VTA's Unsung Hero Award. I'm going to give you back your plaque. Your reliability, your professionalism, your commitment to providing safe and reliable public transportation amid diverse challenges. You joined Dash in 2019 during the WMATA 2019 Platform Improvement Project when Dash operated massive shuttle operation to replace the Blue Line. And in times of crisis, from a sudden severe storm that threatened flooding at Dash's facility in August of 2021 to a neighborhood evacuation for police activity the same year, you have more than exemplified dependability, professionalism, adaptability, and excellence. We are thrilled to have you as a member of the Dash team and hope all aboard and all of us here in the audience will join me in congratulating you on well-deserved recognition. So, and Whitney, are you representing marketing? Or I see Caitlin is on the Zoom. And Martin oversees the marketing communications department, so that's fair to have you up here. So the Special Marketing and Community Outreach Award is a special award category not typically included in the association's annual awards. This award was a special recognition to fully acknowledge the enormous efforts of planning, scheduling, marketing, and communications in orchestrating public outreach for the launch of the new Dash network. So this was September of 2021 and the months leading up to September throughout the spring and summer. Thanks to their commitment, Dash successfully planned and implemented the most substantial single-day service change in our nearly 40-year history. And it was pretty remarkable because I live in a neighborhood, there's a lot of bus stops, and you go around, we created temporary bus stops with the old network to cover up the new stops that were put in. And I saw staff working around the clock the day we implemented this to remove the signs. So that way, starting that morning, we would have all of it up here. And just the amount of public information. See, I do. I'm really proud, and as a rider too, so grateful for the efforts that went into play to make this work and make this seamless for people at a time of great transition, and it's worked very well. So congratulations to you and your department. All right. Now we're going to go on to our public comment. Thank you for bringing up the picture so you can see what it looked like in Roanoke when they got their awards. We take public comment in two ways. Folks can attend virtually and sign up. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to do the Dash special words in motion too. We have one more recognition. And we have several poets who are here who participated in a program that Dash and the city's Office of Arts collaborated on, which is called Dashing Words in Motion. It's basically an idea to get poetry onto our buses and our trolleys. And in some years before COVID, I even think on the trolley, we may have done some live readings of people with their poets. I see staff nodding and some who participated in it. So it's really a wonderful way just to meld art with people trying to move from place to place and give us some variety. So the annual poetry contest encourages writers and poets to submit their work for publication. Cheryl Colton from our Office of Regional Program Director for Office of the Arts has been kind of the staff catalyst behind this project. And she's going to say a few words about the project itself. We're going to have the poets who are here read their work to us, and then the whole board is going to take a picture with the poets. So Cheryl, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. Do I stand over here?
Yeah. Yeah, that way everybody will be able to hear you.
All right. Cheryl Colton, I'm a Regional Program Director with the Office of the Arts, and I was thinking back, this is now the 7th time we've had poetry on the buses. And on behalf of the city's Office of the Arts, thank you to the Alexandria Transit Board, and thank you for all of the poets who have submitted. Not all of the poets for this year were able to attend. So each of the poets that are here, they have a cluster of poems that they'll be reading. So again, thank you, and I hope this will be continuing on.
Hi, I'm Emma Lally. I just finished my first year at UVA, where I plan on majoring in creative writing and chemistry. So this first poem is a haiku by Casey Carlisle. King Street Haiku. Rain at the bus stop. No, make it snow like last week when we both slept in. And this is my poem called Passenger. Passenger. By the 5th stop, you've gathered your bags, rebuttoned your coat, the edges of your seat tug fibers from your scarf, yellow and blue, you exit, umbrella under seat.
Hi, my name is Peter Heimberg. I'm going to read a couple of poems from my colleagues and then one of mine. There seems to be kind of a sleep-in sort of mellow theme. You get on the bus, there's a lot of napping going on. This is by Devin Reese. I know Devin pretty well. She's a neighbor. I'm pretty sure she just ripped this from her journal. Probably really did happen to her. This is called Bus Nap by Devin Reese. Tired mind, long night, hard work at the grind, head back, mouth aslack, slouched on seat, resting feet, stops roll by, finally I rouse, as bus passes, my house. I gotta rest for a second. This is called Moving Towards Zero by Bennett Resnick. Definitely ecologically minded here. I like it. We are the majority, looking for priority. Lanes are the answer. Free dash the advancer. Keep Alexandria moving toward community. Utilize zero emission, public transit. That's ambition. Okay, that's a wait. And this was mine. I thought about this when I was thinking about buses as made in a certain way that make us act better towards each other. So this is called civil engineering. Eggs in a carton, arranging ourselves into a perfect grid within this highly designed city bus. Protected and polite, we ponder passengers and wonder, would they like us? Should they?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Zaina Assam, and I am actually the new poet laureate of the city of Alexandria. I'm delighted to be here. I'm really delighted that we have this contest every year. It's wonderful, as you said, to meld the poetry with the transportation in Alexandria, something that all the community will enjoy. I have 3 poems to read to you tonight, 2 by my colleagues and 1 by me. I'll read one by Bernard J. Martino called Lines. Lines that divide, lines that connect, lines that improve, lines that perfect. Lines on the map, on the road, on the track, lines all around, moving forward, never back. The next poem is by the former poet laureate, Kaniki Jakarta, who just stepped down and I took over. I was her successor. And the title of her poem is Enjoy. Catch a bus on the street of king or queen. Catch glances, catch conversation on your way to your destination. Catch fascination with historic sites. You just might want to relocate to Alexandria. Trolley for free with many sights to see. Become a part of Alexandria's history. The final poem is the one I wrote. I was thinking of all the buses that go east toward the river. Oh, dash bus driver, we're grateful you carry us where road meets river. Water's lap near children playing at the pier. A sailboat floats, now close, now remote. Birds glide, now far, now near. Thank you.
Whitney, you're going to take the photo. How do you want to arrange everybody?
Kind of in the open space here.
Come to the open space.
There you go. Board members too, please.
Yeah, this is all this.
Oh, it's in the middle. Oh, it's in the middle.
Thanks.
Just everybody, I think you're hitting a little bit.
Oh.
Yeah, perfect. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And thank you, Howard.
And to see the poems, you just simply look up towards the ceiling and they're in the placards in the space where we would have ads or service changes and really very nicely formatted. It's great to see. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you very much for listening.
All right, well, that was a little different and I appreciate just also an opportunity. I feel more relaxed and centered. I don't know about you, and it's amazing what art can do for you during that. And I think we have that for frantic commuters who are trying to get places. So we're going to now resume our regular agenda with public comment, which is how we normally start meetings. There are 2 ways to submit public comment. One is to be here in person and to speak, and the other is folks who are attending remotely. We will first recognize speakers who are in the room who signed up in advance, and then I'll recognize speakers remotely who signed up in advance, and then I will poll the room to see if there's anybody else who wishes to be heard who didn't sign up in advance, and then we'll do the same for people who are attending the meeting remotely. You would do so by raising your hand. We have you see the almost like a traffic light there on the page, which has a green light, yellow light, red light. There's 3 minutes to speak, and you'll get warnings as you get closer. I think it's after 2 minutes. If you've spoken 2 minutes, the yellow light will appear, and then the red light will appear when it's time to stop speaking. And there'll be a prompt that will interrupt you if you go over, and I'll ask you to conclude. Everybody can speak once, and we'll go ahead. And Mr. Baker, I believe, has the speakers list. So,
Mr. Chair, thank you. There are 3 speakers who have registered using the kiosk in the meeting room. They are as follows: Jim Murphy, Kathleen Curtin, and Ellen Mosher.
All right, we'll take our first speaker, Mr. Murphy. I see you here.
This is a testimony to the fact that I'm a complex learning environment. At the last Deathless Interlude, Chairman asked me remotely how it was that I managed not to get a survey delivered to its door because he fell within the parameters of our house. And I missed a golden opportunity at that point. Anyway, this morning, late in the game, I delivered to the chairman our petition. And the petition is for among our neighbors from about Cameron Street up to about the 600 block of North Pitt Street, as to whether or not they oppose, support, or abstain from the dash bus proceeding on Pitt Street. I have about 110 responses. They're all opposed. We have them gathered up in a sign-up thing. I've got them arrayed in a matrix here that kind of shows what addresses have signed up. And we've attempted to get them out to you. I hope you will have seen them by now. And that was that one. So check that box. I'm representing partly the ad hoc North Fifth Street Planning Group and kind of the data. And we had 3 sets of data that we wanted to cover. We couldn't get them easily from Dash, not that they weren't there, we just didn't do a successful job of networking. First one was how many of our neighbors though use Dash. And so we had a survey that went out on or about the 27th of April where we queried all of our neighbors as to whether or not they use Dash. And it turned out that about 10 of the families responded that they used it. 2 families said that they use it weekly. 4 families said they use it monthly, and 2 families said that they use it annually. So not a large population using Dash. But the next thing happened that we wondered kind of how many people are going to be driving through our neighborhood if the thing goes through. How many are going to be driving through our neighborhood? So we had a slightly more challenging effort to uncover that one, and so I wrote all 70 lines, morning to night. Took detailed records on who got on, who got off, and where, and what person, so I could track each individual. Came up with some fascinating data, and it's in the materials that we passed out. At any rate, I won't review the data right here, but it's
30 seconds remaining.
Large population. And finally, the last piece of data is the thing that Chairman Kathleen just showed us here was the petition. So I sent out petitions to 194 people. I got 110 replies back. Of the 110, all 110 so far oppose the bus being on North District. I mean, nobody's surprised about that, but we did go out and get our data. And so I encourage you as you go forward with your planning for any of this.
Your
stuff.
time is up. Please finish your comments.
And Jim, I wanted to clarify. So I found this morning in my mail slot that you had left, and I appreciate your note as well, explaining what this was and giving me an option to see what had gone out to other neighbors. And I did send the email that you sent me to the entire board. I know staff had an opportunity to review it because you had sent to many of our senior staff. Candidly for me, I work during the day, so I tried to prepare for the meeting the night before. So I had an opportunity to skim what you provided. I have not read it in depth, but I understand you also were reacting to a proposal that was announced fairly late last week. And so I understand you all didn't have a lot of advance time to act as well. But I just think I wanted to be candid for my colleagues just in terms of what we've been able to digest of the proposal so far.
Greatly relieved to see your morning paper still on the scoop.
Yeah, I hadn't left. Thank you, Jim. Our next speaker, Josh, is
Kathleen Curtin.
My name is Kathleen Curtin. I'm also a member of the Ad Hoc North Pitt Street Planning Group. And first, I'd like to say, given the proposal that we saw at the end of last week, I believe we're grateful that the bus will not be coming along sections of North Pitt Street and Cameron Street. However, looking at option 3 that was proposed, where the bus will turn, we'll have the crossover on Pendleton. The concern that we do have is on the 700 block of North Pitt is the garage access for Harris Teeter and the Kingsley apartment building, which is above the Harris Teeter. And then across the street, on the east side of the street, is the cul-de-sac or circular drive for the Alexandria house. And as I live on the corner of Princess and North Pitt, I traverse that section of North Pitt quite often. And there's always delivery trucks for either the Kingsley or the Alexandria house coming in and, you know, parking in the street. And then there's the hazard of just trying to leave either of those three properties to get onto North Pitt if you're going north or south. And the concern again comes down to a bus stop or even a bus traveling on that street is going to impede a very busy block within the within North Pitt Street. I know you guys are professionals and we trust that you'll do the right thing, but I just wanted to address the hazards of the 700 block of North Pitt Street. Thank you for your time.
My next speaker, Josh.
Ellen Mosher.
My name is Ellen Mosher, and I'm just talking about the option 3, I guess, where the bus would be making a left turn onto Pendleton and then the right turn onto 600 block of North Pitt Street. And on your map, it shows that on these 3 block faces, the 400 block of Pendleton, and then a right turn on the 600 block of North Pitt, and the 700 block of North Pitt, there's 6 block faces, and there will be 6 bus stops. And so with 6 bus stops and 6 block faces, it just seems like it's a bit much. I saw the little circles, the bus stops, and not quite sure, but it seems like a lot. And, so close to each other. And like Kathleen just mentioned, 700 block, how, I mean, that's a real traffic jam with all the cars from the Kingsley apartment building and Harris Teeter coming out. It's a tricky garage because you're coming out at a steep angle. So by the time you get to the top, it's really hard to see around even the parked cars. But when the delivery trucks are there, double parked, it's even more difficult. And then across the street, like Kathleen had mentioned, the circular drive for the Alexandria house. I think that there are 3 entrances from what I remember. But at any rate, it seems like a lot of bus stops in 6 block faces. And if the Kingsley's not good and I'm not quite sure, but at any rate, I just wanted to point that out. It just seems a little busy.
Thanks. And when staff is going to come up later and talk about the proposal, I'll ask them specifically to clarify the bus stops. And also, I know they've taken buses out, and so we'll understand kind of what the experience has been dealing with the traffic on that block from the Teeter as well as the the Alexandria house condo.
And right there, like on the Pendleton, the south side of Pendleton, you have the entrance to the garage or the back alley for Chatham Square. So I'm not quite sure. And then directly across from it is parking that's marked off for that new project at the bus barn. And so it's already limited by the curb cuts, and I think
30 seconds remaining.
there. So I'm not quite sure how a bus stop would fit there because it'd be taking one of the few spaces that they have right there because they have all those big curb cuts and not curb cuts, but those bulbs.
Yeah.
And so I just, it seems like it's a tricky area to try to have 6 bus stops or even like 2 on Pendleton and then 2 on North Pitt, even if those were the only 2.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
it seems tricky.
Your time is up. Please finish your comments.
And I do live, as Jim pointed, I live in the area, so I'm familiar with the conditions that you described on that roadway. So
Okay, all right.
I spent quite a bit of time on North Pitt Street.
All right.
So thank you. Let's go now to speakers who signed up remotely in advance. Josh, do we have anyone?
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of anyone who signed up in advance, but am watching attendees' hands, and Whitney may also be able to assist.
Yeah, Whitney's come up to the podium. I think she said she can manage the remote speakers. So, okay.
Good evening again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We have two registrants to speak this evening virtually. The first is Bonnie O'Day.
Bonnie, are you with us? Didn't know she's on the Zoom.
She is online.
Why don't we call the other speaker and then we'll try Bonnie again.
Sure. The second speaker that we have signed up virtually is Stan Smith.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman and board members. Thank you for this time. I actually have more questions than comments. But let's start with the form to sign up to speak was not working properly. And if you go online, you're going to see that it actually has the previous speaker's information as the questions. So just letting you know to please fix that. The one comment about traffic, the corner of North Pitt and Wythe, or Wythe, still don't know what it's called, but has the entrance to Harris Teeter. And during high traffic times, there's 3 or 4 cars lined up in both directions to come in or go out of that garage. Putting the bus line on there will create not just excessive traffic on that spot, but backed up traffic, significant backed up traffic. I can also tell you that there's quite a bit of pedestrian traffic that crosses right on the entrance to Harris Teeter from that back end. And that's going to put a little bit more, to say, traffic that hurts, I should say, the pedestrians. Not hurts as in physically yet. But I can also tell you that a lot of the seniors that live 1 block away do use Wythe Street and go up into Harris Teeter through that entrance. And it's going to be just a lot more difficult for the seniors and those people to cross that street to get into that back entrance to Harris Teeter. The other question I have is, when did this new proposal come out? Because I have signed up for everything from Dash. I've gotten emails from Martin, yet I didn't get this new proposal. So I actually haven't had that much time to review it. And I'm curious, why wasn't it sent to people that were already signed up? And my final question is, as I understand right now, you did propose to go on to move it off of some streets. Why? What was your reason to do that? And why wasn't it that same reason to keep it off the rest of North Pitt? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We try Bonnie again.
It looks like she's been given the option to speak and she's been unmuted. So Bonnie, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Oh, yay. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, my name is Bonnie O'Day, and I'm a member of the Dash Advisory Board. And I just want to say that I really appreciate the transit service that you all provide. It's very important to people like me and many others. I am legally blind with only partial vision and use a variety of public transit options, including the Dash bus, Metro, Uber, Lyft, and I walk and occasionally use the DOT Paratransit. I am really pleased that the city officials are reviewing the paratransit service, and I really look forward to the presentation. The service has experienced some difficulties since the White Top has stopped providing service. I think they went out of business during the pandemic. They're using Diamond Transportation. Just an experience I had last Friday, I had scheduled a trip with my husband to take his guide dog to the vet, and the vehicle showed up. Well, it didn't show up. I waited for half an hour. I called. They said it would be another 15 minutes, which would mean that it was 45 minutes late. So I opted to cancel that ride and call an Uber because we were going to miss our appointment. On the way home, we found that we waited for almost an hour beyond our scheduled pickup time. I want to stress that nobody is at fault here. It's the system that needs to be modified and modernized. I've noticed that most of the time we receive a van, a large van, which is wonderful for people who use wheelchairs, but probably is not terribly cost effective for people who don't need that type of service. If you're able to get in and out of a vehicle, it might be more cost effective to send another type of vehicle. The American Foundation for the Blind has conducted a study on innovative paratransit services, and I'd be really happy to share that with any official who would be interested. Again, I thank you for your work, and I look forward to
30
hearing
seconds remaining.
paratransit discussion later in the meeting. Thank you.
Bonnie, thank you. This is very helpful feedback. And Hillary Orr, our Deputy Director of Transportation Environmental Services, serves on our board and will be giving the presentation later tonight. And I know I saw her taking notes as you were speaking. So, thank you for offering that feedback. And, this is a topic that I think we have all wanted to kind of learn more about and understand kind of what that experience is for people who rely on those vehicles to navigate around the city. And I appreciate you spending the time to share your feedback with the staff and with the board.
Thank you.
Oh, Hillary, one comment as well.
And thank you. And I believe you have my email address, but I would be interested in that report if you would like to send it my way.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, so now I'm going to poll the room. Is there anybody who didn't sign up in advance who would like to speak in public comment?
Mr. Chair, we have one individual who has a raised hand on the Zoom.
Okay, we'll take that after the person in the room who's going to.
Okay.
My name is Kara Fast. I live in Portner's Landing, 505 Pendleton Street. We recently moved from Chatham Square about a year and a half ago. And I just wanted to kind of speak on behalf of the 600 block of North Pitt. Like Chatham Square, we have an exit and entrance into the community onto Pitt Street. And so I think I just wanted to point that out, that it's already pretty hairy. The nature of the traffic on Pitt Street, North Pitt, is much different than the nature of the traffic on Fairfax. And so I think that the amount of homes that we have there on the 600 block and the entrance and the exit make it a little bit of a dicey situation with the bus turning off Pendleton onto North Pitt. And I just want to kind of end with a question, and that is, one of the options is the Madison Montgomery Street. And so my question would be, do we have any, negative replies against that option? Because I think it's a pretty popular option with a lot of the people that we've spoken to in the neighborhood. And there's a lot of, I don't want to say negative, but a lot of nays to the Pendleton 600 block of North Pitt. And so if we can win-win this, make it work, put it in the center of the hub, but still get it off, homes that are close to the sidewalk and that are entering and exiting what is a heavy traffic area on North Pitt as opposed to North Fairfax. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, Josh, you had a speaker on the Zoom who would like to be heard?
Yes, I'll allow Caitlin to promote him to speak. His name is Grant Slayton. And I believe, Grant, you can unmute now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Baker. I'm Grant Slayton. I live at 426 North Pitt Street. And I'm here to speak about agenda item 6, which is the proposed change to line 34. And I'm speaking in opposition to it, along with all the other comments you've received in the last couple of months. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak about this. I understand you've got a difficult job. I was reading through your transit development plan, and it's a complex system, and you're considering lots and lots of variables. But I would like to point out that this particular change is such a small part of the overall transit development plan. If you look on page 40 of your draft report, this change only suggests, or staff suggests, that it could increase up to 7,000 riders. It's the smallest of all the proposed changes in increased ridership. In fact, the first one is 144,000 riders. We're talking 7,000 riders a year. And it's engendered a lot of opposition. I think probably 100% of the comments based on this have probably been in opposition. I know my neighbors have been giving me surveys and going door to door and talking about it, and everyone I've spoken to is opposed to it. I'll defer to my neighbors' expert commentary on this, the ad hoc Pitt Street Planning Group, because I think they've done a really good job of laying out some of the opposition to the plan. And I would like to point out at the last meeting, one of the board members had pointed out that your own consultants that you'd hired last year, and these are bus line operating consultants, they said that the goal was to concentrate as many lines as possible on the same roads, so that you get that frequency of service for people. And for some reason, where you used to have 3 lines on Fairfax, now you're just going to have 2, and you're putting another line on Pitt. And so it seems to go against what you paid your consultants to tell you a year ago. And there might be good reasons for that, I understand, and I'll defer to y'all's expert opinion. I know you've got a difficult job, and we appreciate all you do. But once again, I just wanted to say I'm opposed to the change of putting line 34 on Pitt Street in any way. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any other speakers? This is the last chance to raise your hand. Nobody on Zoom? All right, public comment is closed. All right, next order of business, we have the meeting minutes from May 4th. And although Steve is not here today, I do want to recognize he did an outstanding job running the meeting last month when I was unable to attend. And I did follow up with him through email just to let him know my appreciation, because I asked him the day before to do this, and he really mastered this, and I'm glad he was able to step in. On the meeting minutes, are there any changes or amendments to the minutes as they were presented? If not, I'll take a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Matt. Is there a second? Second, Hillary. All in favor?
Aye.
And thank you. Kendall has joined us as well. All right, next order of business, the chair's report. I got through many of the items I had, which was to talk about our new board members and welcoming everybody back. Just one other thing to mention, as we're moving into summer recess after this meeting, so we won't meet through July and August. We'll come back together in September. Staff is, I know, working very hard to look at getting us back, at least on a part-time basis, to City Hall, where we will be more accessible to riders who want to come and participate in our meetings. The challenge has been some of the remote meeting capabilities and the technology that is different from the technology that Dash has invested a lot in, that we have here in this room. But I do think there's a lot of, it's important that we be accessible to the members of the public who use our system and want to be able to participate. So we will hopefully be able to make that work. The other thing is we're going to be looking at some of our policies, in particular, developing a board policy around public comment. Public comment didn't exist when I joined the board, and it was something that always had surprised and bothered me a little bit as somebody who had attended board meetings in the past, that there was no opportunity except for a once-a-year hearing to be heard by the board. And so I had, about a year after serving on the board, had approached our chair at the time, Mr. Abramson, and said, I think we need to do this and be more accessible to our public and listen to them. And we just sort of started doing it, and it was very lightly used. It has at times now been used more regularly as we've had more of our stakeholders who have been interested in what we've been doing and wanting to weigh in on it. And staff, I think, has done an excellent job of now also trying to manage kind of 2 methods of public comment. And so what I'm going to ask to do over the summer is to just try to write a policy that just explains, how does public comment work? What are things that are acceptable for public comment? For example, we don't want somebody to come and say, you should fire X employee because they did this and that. That's not appropriate for this forum, and for some personnel issues and other things that might be legally protected, to say, hey, that's not something that's appropriate here, and to basically just have a framework so we have something in writing. They've asked me to kind of say what are my thoughts as to what that should look like to get staff started with that. So I've committed to sharing that with them over the summer. If you have any suggestions about how that should work or what that should look like, to please let me know, because I want to continue to have public comment every month, but I also want to kind of give the staff some guidance so that they can administer this in a way that's kind of fair to everybody, and also to the way we do our business as well, because we have to be able to get to the agenda items that are part of this as well. So look forward to doing that. And I also think Hillary had approached me and said, we need to kind of look at how we do public comment, and I agree. And I think City Council has a very good policy that we might look to start with as to how they do comment at their Saturday meetings. The other thing I'll be doing is reaching out to all of you over the summer, simply just to ask how's it going, or to say hello to those of you I haven't met yet, and just to at least have a phone conversation. If you'd like to go get coffee, I'm up for that too. I'd like to get to know all of you a little better, because it's been a long time since we were together, and also just to understand if there are things we can do better, and to kind of open that dialogue, things that we can improve for September. So look forward to those conversations, and thank you for your willingness to engage in that. That's all I have. So Hillary, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I will start with my report tonight. Let's see, there's so much technology in the room. Raymond, where am I pointing?
You can just click. You should click.
There is a lag, a bit of a lag.
I was clicking it during David's presentation to test it, and it didn't. There you go. Are you doing that?
Not sure what I was. You go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I've got a number of these tonight, but they were in your packet, so I'm gonna go through them quickly, and then if you have questions, we can go into more detail. I will continue to update you all on the WMATA 22-23 Metro Rail shutdown. So on May 24th, WMATA and the city presented to City Council on the shutdown, to kind of give a high-level overview of our principles in terms of what the city expects from WMATA, but also hear from WMATA a little bit about their mitigation plan, and then we talked about the city's mitigation plan. This is still being developed. WMATA's should come out any day now with their final plan. But city staff and WMATA are coordinating on what that's going to look like. And again, starting in September, there's the full shutdown south of Reagan Airport for all rail in the city. And then, so that's about 6 weeks. But then following that through the spring, there'll be shutdown of the yellow line, and yellow line track will be replaced with blue line, will be running on the yellow line. So there will be that rail option, but once you won't be able to go directly into DC like you can now on the yellow line. So we are all working together on that. Next, the Duke Street in Motion. This is our Duke Street Transitway project. We had our second advisory group meeting on June 1st. The group adopted the vision and guiding principles that will help kind of guide the planning process that we're undertaking. We're meeting again, I think at the end of June, and we will be going into the 2012 concept that was approved by City Council to really look at that and dive in and see kind of what we like about that still, what elements of that plan meet the guiding principles and vision that we have discussed. And so we'll be then going through concept designing this summer, and have a pretty robust community engagement process in the fall. The I-495 South Side Express Lane study, I don't think this was in my packet before. VDOT is doing a study on 495 for express lanes. So we have express lanes on 395. This would be south of the city on 495, crossing the Wilson Bridge. They did a number of public meetings in May. I think they had 3 virtual and 1 in-person meeting. Pretty decent attendance from Alexandria, and good comments from our residents. This is something the city will be writing a letter. Public comment is open now. They extended it. It's open till June 20th. So if you'd like more information on this, they have a pretty robust website. Right now, it's just a study, and they're looking at some alternative options to see how they might incorporate express lanes.
Hillary, are they express lanes or HOT, high occupancy toll lanes?
They would be the same as, yeah, the high occupancy toll, so the same as 395, so either HOV or, HOT.
Either one of those.
Yeah, like I assume it's going to be the same where HOV is free and then, or you pay the toll if
Gotcha.
you're not HOV.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think, I think that's part of it. Right now, the study is really looking at options for how they would lay that out. I think the one thing we want to follow is the Woodrow Wilson Bridge and kind of the space that was reserved for transit and how that might be used. So that's the key thing for us to look at for
And
transit.
I think that bridge was designed for a train as well.
Yes.
Is that under consideration or?
So not as part of this, but there were lanes that were reserved for rail or
Okay,
transit.
okay.
So, I think WMATA is participating in this and we'll be, looking at their blue, orange, silver line study to kind of see, what would happen. That would be in pretty far in the future. So, but I think we need to be aware of that and follow that.
Thank you.
Just an update on the WMATA zero emission bus transition plan. Following in Dash's footsteps, WMATA is released their zero emission bus transition plan. I believe they have 12 buses coming this year. They will discontinue purchasing diesel buses next year, and over the next 20 or so years will be about a $1 to $2 billion investment. They're hoping to upgrade their northern facility and to be able to have 150 electric buses by 2026. So we'll be going through a lot of the things that we have been going through. So hopefully we'll be talking to them and collaborating on this project.
Just real quick, and I didn't realize I should jump in as you went. I have two quick questions about your first ones. The yellow line shutdown. I remember during the blue line shutdown, when we were trying to bridge from Braddock, there was an issue with dash buses and regular metro buses being able to use the rapid transit lanes through Potomac Yard. Is that going to be resolved this time around, or is Metroway still going to box that out for their own personal use?
Well, it was more an issue of being able to use the bus signals because WMATA had the technology to use the bus signals, and that's their technology is different than Dash's technology for transit signal priority. But we were working to address that. Raymond, do you know if Dash buses are able to use that? No.
I think we share common technologies on other corridors, but not Route 1.
Yeah.
Okay. If that, so I'm just suggesting that as we think about those mitigations, if that was something that we'd be able to be proactive about this time, I remember that being a hurdle last time around.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that.
Well, and then the other thing, just about Duke Street in Motion, does a Dash have a seat at the table? Is someone from Dash staff formally part of that group and participating in that process?
The Dash Riders Group has a representative on the advisory group, but Dash staff is very involved from the city internal working group side.
Awesome.
Chair, so one additional comment on the Route 1. So I just want to follow up. So previously we had thought that Dash was not able to use the Metroway dedicated lanes. We've since done testing where Dash actually can. So actually with our line 34, which is going to be rerouted up to Potomac Yard when the metro station opens, we will be able to use those lanes. So I just wanted to clarify that point. However, as it relates to the shutdown, I don't think we would be using it because we're not planning to operate shuttles right now. So we probably wouldn't use it also. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, so I put this in there hoping that you all would read what I wrote since June 5th has passed. But the city is working on the Mount Vernon Avenue North project, and we're looking at safety improvements along that corridor, mainly at intersections, but also looking at transit stops and access to transit stops and transit stop amenities. And so this is the Arlandria portion, so from 4 Mile to Glebe Road, and there's some great materials online to look at the different options for some intersection redesign. Certainly, if you all have comments on that, if you've missed the deadline, that's okay. You can still share them with me, and I will pass them on to the project manager. But it's an exciting project. We've been working, to get to this point for a while, and it's, we have really high ridership in that area. So I think it'll be a great project to make that area a lot safer and more walkable and transit accessible.
Hillary, I assume pedestrian lighting is folded in as part of that effort, like they're thinking comprehensively about, say, not just like intersection safety, but also do we have pedestrian scale lighting all the way along that whole stretch?
We're not looking at that's a little bit outside of the scope of this project. It's more intersection construction. But I think that's a conversation that we'll continue to have. We're looking at that more as part of Vision Zero and where we need to do that. And we have been upgrading all of our lights to LED. So we've made a lot of progress this year on that.
I did take the survey before it closed. Yeah, I did notice it doesn't appear there was anything specifically related to cycling infrastructure as part of that.
That's right. We're looking more right now at intersections and how we design the intersections. And it was not specifically, it wasn't looking at the whole corridor and how we designate lanes on the corridor at this point. We wanted to kind of focus on the intersections and get that piece in. Looking at the corridor is a feature.
Yeah, some of the bus stop improvements are quite good. I mean, I was glad that we're going to be able to enlarge some of those shelters that are very heavily used and also relocate closer to crosswalks to discourage some of those mid-block running across as you see your bus coming down Mount Vernon.
Yep.
So,
There's no
yeah,
dash
that's great.
below down there. These dash doesn't currently go down that stretch of Mount Vernon. So I'm gonna throw that out there.
I'm sorry, Dish.
Dash doesn't go down that stretch of Mount Vernon currently.
That's
It's just Ramada buses. So just wanted to like put that out there.
Yeah, they do have, they cross the glebe though, and there was mention of
Hopefully
the
one
that
day it can go.
intersection.
Well, but that doesn't go to Bernal Run though. That's not.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like glebe, but the corner of glebe to Mount Vernon.
Yes, but those are very heavily used dash bus stops too at Glebe and Mount Vernon. And so there's 3 different designs. One quite interesting and on the Mount Vernon and Glebe intersection. So I think that intersection was specifically looked at too, because we know that where the bus stops are located, we have a lot of kind of mid-block crossing from pedestrians there. So hopefully some of the designs will help take care of that and provide more direct access to the bus stops for people that are walking.
But I think to your point in the long term of looking at what kind of service could be provided there, if there's a need, and also, I mean, then you look at Dash. I think the reason it's been a Metro bus corridor is because it's right on the border of the city, and then you have issues with crossing into Arlington. But just kind of keeping that in mind as we do future planning for updating the ATV is if there's a ability to provide more service to folks in that area, I would be interested in knowing about it, like you, what opportunities exist.
And then lastly, we every 2 years, I believe this one might have been delayed a year because of COVID, but we do an Alex Move travel survey. And so there's always the state of the commute survey and of course census data that's out there, but a lot of that information is really focused on how people get to work. And so the Alex Move survey is trying to get more information about how people take all trips around the city. So just a couple interesting findings. Obviously, no surprise to anyone that more people are working from home. That increased from 6% in 2016 to 40% in 2021. So that definitely shifts our trips and also the patterns and the times of day that we're looking at more traffic on the streets. Commute trips on Metro Rail have decreased. They were only 6% of work trips in 2021 compared to 2014. And then the other interesting thing here was that jumped out to me was that more children are walking to school, which is great. About 40% of the respondents with school-age children said that they were walking to school as compared to 16%, or no, I'm sorry, 24% in 2016. The city's been doing a lot of work to implement the safe routes to school recommendations from the walk audits that we did. And we did the walk audits in 2018. It's all blending together now, but we've implemented more than half of those recommendations around schools.
And Hillary, are you able to factor in Metro Rail's decline in service, particularly during rush hour? So, I would drive now rather than take Metro just because the lead times are so terrible. So were you able to discount or handicap that or not?
Not really. I mean, I think it's something we know
Okay.
in general and use in our decision making.
Does that number surprise you at all, or?
Well, not really.
Yeah.
I think we've had, with Metro shutdown and COVID and changes and I mean, if you think too about people that are working from home that maybe took the bus before, it might not all be due to Metro's
That's right,
service.
that's right.
Yeah.
We hope your like federal employees get a subsidy directly from, it's not a pre-tax benefit, it's a subsidy to ride transit. And those offices have been among the last to be returning to the workplace too. So even maybe into 2023, you might not see some of those trips coming back. And those are people who have a lot of incentives to ride transit
Yeah.
because it's free essentially for them.
Like, what was the response rate on the survey? Do you know how many? Okay. I think I have filled this out in the past. I think it's great the city does it. I am curious, for a city of 160,000 people, if we get 1,000 responses, like it's still more kind of like anecdotal feedback as opposed to
Yeah.
definitive data.
Yeah, so we do it is a random survey and it goes out to a number of households and our results, so I want to say 2 years ago, we did not get enough results and we had to send out more. This time, I think we did get enough results to have some statistically significant findings. But the whole report is online as well. And I should have put the link in here, but I could send it to anybody that's interested, they can't find it. Okay, so unless there's any other questions, I'll dive into our paratransit program update. I know this is something that is important to the board and Chair has been asking for a while. We have been working on new contracts, which is why I wanted to get those contracts signed and in place before we came forward with this presentation. There's a lot of slides, so I'm going to go through it kind of quickly, but again, feel free to stop me and we can just talk about things as we go, or we can talk about them at the end. So just as a little bit background. So the paratransit service is began in 1984, and then we expanded our service areas in 1993. And what paratransit is, any jurisdiction that has fixed route transit has to also provide complimentary paratransit services. So some people might be familiar with Metro Access. That is WMATA's paratransit program. So we have DOT Paratransit, which is the city's program. So Metro Access goes into DC right now. We originally started just in Alexandria, but then expanded to some other areas. But this is a service for city residents who can't use regular transit service due to a disability. So there's a number of kind of groups involved. The reservations are managed by our senior services. We have Diamond as our transit provider. This is we did an RFP and Diamond won the contract. Diamond had, as Ms. O'Day mentioned, had taken over the service from previously we had cab companies that were running the service. Diamond took that over during COVID when they were unable to fulfill the contract, and they do have an all van service, but they have added supplementary sedan service. They partnered with another firm to do that. So we will be seeing more sedan service, but Diamond, the company, they have vans, and that is what they use. And then the other exciting piece of this is that as part of this RFP, we had an option for companies to bid on the data and technology piece of this. So we have VIA, who some of you might recognize the name. They were TNC and they've done other work, but they are now our contractor for data and technology. So we operate in Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax County, City of Fairfax, and Falls Church. Fares went free in September when Dash went free, because paratransit can be twice as much as your fixed route system, and 0 times $2 is 0. So, and then anything outside of the city is $4 up to 5 miles, and then $6 up. This is really just, we partnered with a firm as part of kind of a nonprofit group that partners cities with data company startups to do pilot projects. And we said, we have all this information on paratransit and it's all this data and it's not organized, and we need some help understanding what's happening within our system so that we can actually craft this RFP. So we just have some of the information that we pulled here, but you definitely see a big drop in trips. That was COVID. That was right in April 2020, I believe. But 70% of our trips are within Alexandria. 21% are 5 miles, and then only 9% are more than 5 miles. So for most of those trips outside of Alexandria, we do think people are using Metro Access. We also did a survey we also pulled information on our clients. So we have about 1,900 clients that are certified. So people have to provide an application and have a doctor saying that they need to be in the service, but we really only have about 500 that are active. And that was, again, prior to COVID. And the median age is 71 and more females than males in this service. Overall, so we did a client survey as well. And overall, really good feedback from our clients on the Paratransit program, which is one of the reasons we're looking at expanding our service into DC, because we think people like our service. They feel safe. They feel that the vehicles are clean. We generally get good feedback from our customers. One of the things that we did ask, because we are updating this data contract, was how clients want to make reservations. Almost 80% said they still want to make them by phone, but 21% said they would be willing to use an app or a website, which is, as our population ages and people have been using technology longer, we obviously think that'll increase, but VIA will be providing an app and then also an online portal for reservations to be made that way and not so much over the phone. And we think that, that shift will be really good for clients, and then also just helping us kind of streamline our system. Some of you like budget numbers, so I had to put this in here. Our operating budget was 1.6 million in FY 2022. The dash fare free, we were only collecting about $75,000 of revenue. So that was a loss, but a small loss. Our per trip cost is actually about $51 a trip. Metro Access has gone up a lot with COVID, and they're starting to go back down. But in FY 22, FY 21, they were at $152 a trip. Another reason why we are looking to expand our service and try and shift some of our clients to the DOT system instead of Metro Access. Some of the challenges that this program has not been updated in decades. We think that we're going to have more clients as our population ages. Cost of our service is increasing, but so is Metro Access. We did have a pretty inefficient routing system. The reservations you have to make 24 hours in advance, and then we weren't getting good data to really understand who was using the system and how they were using it. So those have been some of our challenges. When we updated our Alexandria mobility plan, there was a policy to make transit easier, and one of the specific strategies was to modernize the paratransit program for the city's aging population. So that is why we started diving into the data a little bit more, and then wrote the RFP in a way to get a new data provider so we could actually use the data in a way to make better decisions about routing and shared rides, and is there some kind of circulator that makes sense based on the trips people are taking and the times of day, and just overall create a better service for our customers and give them more options and flexibility.
Or just before you move on from that slide, just as a side note on the man who's holding the walking stick is Chet Avery, and he's actually responsible for why we have enunciators on our buses that announce the stops. Dash staff have been resistant to that for years because they thought it just was too much noise on the bus. And Mr. Avery, who is legally blind, and actually really spoke to why that was such a barrier for people riding buses, and finally was the breakthrough that allowed us to kind of get that technology on the buses that it was just we take for granted now. But it was not always the case. So.
And room 2000 at City Hall is
named
named after Chet.
Yeah, he was
He and his wife are
activist for years in the city. I think still lives in the Rosemont neighborhood.
Yeah, Linden, East Linden.
East Linden. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah. So we have made some progress toward this strategy. So like I said, in 2021 was when we partnered with SibStart, this firm, and they analyzed our existing client data and trip data and gave us some really good information to put in the RFP so that companies would we would get better bids from companies because they would understand more information about how people used our system and the types of trips that people were taking. And then in 2021, we put out the request for proposals, and we again awarded it to Diamond and Via. So some of the upcoming changes that customers will see, partnering with Via, we'll be launching this service this summer. So online booking and app booking will have better reporting features, more efficient routing through their system. You know, right now clients call in, make a reservation, and it goes into a system and a trip is created, versus a routing system that is, you know, you could pick up multiple clients on the same trip. You could do shared rides. So there's lots of options there. And then there's a lot of new client communication features, like, you know, if you a text when your ride is coming, more information to help people understand, you know, where their car is and how long that will take, and just better communication, and then improved client tracking and updating. So our client database, we need to make sure we know who's certified, when their certification expires. And so this system will help us better manage that side of things. We have improvements with our transportation provider, Diamond. They're subcontracting with, it's a company called Users. It's a TNC, and they've operated with other paratransit companies in other cities. And then again, a more efficient booking process with them. And then on Tuesday, we'll be going to council to request that they adopt a resolution expanding our service area into Washington, DC. And again, hopefully this will shift some of our Metro Access trips off Metro Access and onto our system, because it is less expensive, and we think probably a better overall service than Metro Access.
Yeah, Carla, I was going to ask you, like, if I was a paratransit user, and I understand now that if I was going to DC and Maryland today, I would have to use Metro Access as proof of vote. But why would somebody pick Metro Access over DOT right now? Is there?
You mean for trips within Alexandria?
Or just even within the Virginia service area?
I don't know. I mean, I think that not everybody is a client for both systems. Some people might be comfortable with Metro Access, so they just choose to use Metro Access. But I think some of the information we will have now with this routing system will give us some better information about that, where people are going, and we'll be able to compare, you know, how people behaved before versus how they behave once we kind of expand our services, and see if we can shift more rides to DOT paratransit. But I don't know why people choose which ones they choose, but I think our program is pretty popular within Alexandria trips.
Also, is there a consideration to have a hybrid of Metro Access and the DOT, and maybe Uber and everything? Was there any discussions about if they can be combined, integrated into some sort of a system that operates as one system but has separate entities running? So
Metro Access, I mean, we could just have Metro Access in Alexandria, because it operates everywhere that our paratransit system operates. So we could just have the one. We think our system provides better customer service, so that's why we have two. A lot of jurisdictions have two. I mean, I think if there are a lot of conversations about going on right now, the efficiencies of Metro Access. And so I think the jurisdictions are seeing these increasing trip costs, are starting to think about, how do we handle that, and how do, you know, what do we need to do, and do we need two systems, or do we need one system, or does Northern Virginia have one system? So, you know, we have looked at, both of our contracts are rideable, so all the other jurisdictions in Northern Virginia and DC, we did that intentionally so that if they want to use, Arlington actually already uses Diamond, but if anybody wants to use Via, so we can share data and you know, work more as a region. People don't really care where the boundaries of the jurisdictions are, that we could do that. So we are kind of having those conversations, but right now people have the option to use whichever service they choose. We've been talking a lot with Metro Access. They're actually they have a program too, where they shift some of their rides to TNCs now. If you don't need a wheelchair service, they just, they're partnering with that to kind of see how that goes, and hoping to increase that service, which decreases the overall cost of their program, and ultimately, in theory, benefits us too. So just last slide, but just some of the future improvements, we're looking at kind of pricing to incentivize travel behavior. So having some more of the data from VO will be really helpful with this, like looking at, shared rides and off-peak rides, and trip patterns for shuttle type service, an easier certification for eligibility. Our application process is not super modern right now. Doing the travel training, which is one of our other Alexandria Mobility Plan goals, and looking for some grant opportunities to do some of that. And then exploring grants for mainly travel training, but there's a lot of new grants coming out right now. So there could be some other things that support our program. I haven't seen anything that supports our operating costs, but we will keep our eye out for those. So travel training is when you are meeting with clients and teaching them about all their different options and how to get around it, how to use it. So now we have an app and a website. How do they access that? How do they use that to book their rides? And so there's specific travel training, but then there's also travel training about here's where the bus is and here's how you use this option. Here's how you use an Uber app. So all of that kind of stuff.
That was a great presentation, especially because we don't really do this type of paratransit ever as dashboard. Just a couple of questions, and I don't mean to take your time. Like, how many vans are there with Diamond? Do you know? Okay. Because the problem I hear with Metro Access is people sometimes wait hours for the vans to show up, and sometimes they just give up.
But with our new system, we will have better tracking of either no-show clients, no-show vans, how long it took, how close they were to their pickup time, arrival time, because they're all going to have GPS devices and app. Some of them probably had that before, but we didn't have good access to that data. So
I'm sure, no doubt, it'll be much better than Metro Access. And how elastic is the system? In other words, if there's a higher demand, can they expand with more vans, if you know?
So they plan ahead. That's why they contracted with User, because a lot of our rides, you don't need a van. So that's a supplemental service that they will have. And I think, again, watching the data and kind of seeing the uptick, we'll be able to expand, in accordance with that and plan ahead and be more flexible.
On a macro level, but not really on a micro level, I take it.
Well, I mean, I think day to day, I think they have enough vans to support the system. We do still have the 24-hour requirement for reservations, which is something I'm hoping that we can shift away from, as particularly once more people are booking through the website and with the app, and it's a little bit more real time. But now, because we have that in place, you do have a little bit of time to plan. And Diamond is also, like I said, they're in Arlington and maybe some other jurisdictions too. So they're a company bought Diamond, and now they operate a lot of
National Express. Yeah, and I dealt with National Express for years through Durham and National Express. And then the last thing is, these are non-CDL drivers, but are they trained specifically to deal with people with mobility issues? Okay.
That was a big component of our RFP, was the training process, and they all had to report on their training process, and we had requirements as well.
And I assume they carry the insurance, not the city, just in case, or pass through, just in case, and you hear horror stories in the school busing. Oh, Johnny was left on the bus, and parents weren't there. And, you would hate for us to get bad publicity when there's the unlikely event of an emergency or some catastrophic event like that.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I should look into that.
I mean, it's a routine, but I appreciate.
I'm sure our attorneys worked all that up, but I don't do that off the top of my head.
I have one quick question. This is a little bit of progressive thinking, but was there at any point any effort to understand the population that uses paratransit, right? There's people with cognitive limitations or mobility limitations. Was there any assessment done to understand why they cannot use the fixed route services that we offer? Was this access to stops or lack of sidewalks to get there, or lack of access to vehicles or lack of navigation technologies and everything. Was there any assessment done to understand that?
So right now, to get into the program, a doctor just has to certify them, and I don't even know how much information we get about the specific medical issue. We get some information if we need to provide that information to the driver so they're aware. But basically, the doctor makes the call of whether or not they can physically get to the fixed route stop. And so we don't actually get that type of information.
The reason that I'm asking is that not on the medical side, but from the facility and the service side or scheduling side, is there anything that is being done by the fixed route, the Dash service that can actually accommodate some of those trips that are and the reason that I'm asking is obviously several of the programs that I was involved in the past when I was employed by the Federal Transit Administration, we would start the discussion with that to understand what are the barriers for them to not to use the fixed route transit, and if there are like easy fixes that can be done, like a navigation application perhaps, or to have an inventory of the bus stops and then access to bus stops and things like that. That might actually, because the numbers that you're mentioning, like $51 per trip, $152 per trip, 24-hour advanced notification. So that is kind of almost, you have a segregated system for people with limitations and people without limitations. And those are actually barriers that are increasing that segregation. So the reason that I'm asking those questions is that probably we can work towards more integration rather than more segregation. So, maybe we can work on something like that to kind of understand more what can be done.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment. I think part of working with VIA is that we'll have better communication with clients. So if we need to do a quick polling or we want to do more, one of the things that we're trying to look at is who are our, we had active users versus registered users, but who are our, what do we call them, like our power users or something, the people that are using the service a lot and kind of using them more to get information rather than trying to, figure out something from all 1,900 clients.
Sure.
Let's focus on the core user group and get information from them. So with the new technology, we'll be able to have better two-way communication. So I think that's something we can certainly look into. We did, when was it, Martin Raymond, that we went free for, yes, 2018, we made Dash free for anyone that was a paratransit or had Metro Access. They just had to show the card and then they were able to ride for free. So we definitely saw people using Dash, which, point of paratransit, you can't, but we're still glad to, shift rides to Dash where we can. And then we're also we are doing a bus stop inventory currently to look at some of that stuff and start prioritizing stops. But I think we'll get more information, and just having this database, we'll be able to, see what some of the barriers are and to reach out to our clients and get that information.
And perhaps like an OD level granularity would also help to understand, because some of the services, it could be almost like a paratransit service on a fixed schedule that can actually serve certain destinations.
Yeah, exactly. And
especially DC, like if you're expanding to DC to make those longer trips, if there's a known destination that we can identify, so that might be very beneficial.
That is the whole reason we were really excited about VIA's proposal, because we'll have that information and be able to do better routing. And, I think a lot of people still use it to do errands and go to the grocery store, but they might not need to go at an exact time. They could have a window. And if we know that certain people have this window every week, we could do some kind of shuttle or something. So we're excited to see what the data tells us.
I was curious. Are you guys allow people to make reservations via the phone, or is it just going to be via the app only as you move to technology?
No, we're still keeping senior services as our reservation system. But the data, they will input the data into the system, so even the phone reservations will go into the same routing system.
Okay. And when you did the feedback for the survey, what was the response rate for that, and how were people able to give their feedback? You said there's only 500 active users.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, that survey was administered, I think we did it like a year ago. And I believe that so we have a paratransit coordinator for the city and she works closely with the clients. I think she did some phone calls and then she also sent out like paper forms and that they could mail back because, I mean, that for most of our clientele, that's actually the way they prefer to. It's easier for them than trying to have them access something online. She might have had an online component to it also, but typically we're mailing these folks information and that's it's not the best communication system and so we're looking to update it.
Will there be any like education, like component to tell residents and doctors' offices and social workers and stuff about?
Yep, that's part of the contract with VIA is they have to do a whole training program and marketing materials and informational materials for clients.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
This was a great conversation and I appreciate you, Hillary, putting this together and I can see why you kept saying we've got to wait for that new contract to be in place because that was really some exciting changes. I just wanted to clarify for the board why we wanted to do this presentation for so long, and for those who haven't been on the board for a while, haven't heard this. In 2013, council redid our bylaws and actually one of the things they primarily were changing the structure of the board, but one of the things that just got inserted in there was that our board is over paratransit. And I said, what does that mean? In 2013. And this is the first time we have ever actually talked about paratransit around this table. And so it's kind of a really cool historic moment because, you know, when members of the community want to come and talk about problems with paratransit, they actually are supposed to come to us. And so now I think we have a much better understanding of how these systems integrate and also of just what the city is also doing to be proactive to kind of help to improve that experience. And so I'm really glad for that. Oh, I just wanted to ask one question. I always at the time had raised the question of, well, isn't this better with maybe the Commission on Persons with Disabilities or with the Commission on Aging in terms of just people who are more likely to be users of that system who have oversight? I also understand that perhaps those are boards that are staffed by Human Services and not TNES. Well, this is a TNES program, but has there been, what's the coordination relationship like and how are those groups providing input into you know, shaping the system?
Yeah, I mean, we work closely from the staff level with Senior Services because they are the reservation system. So they had somebody, Department of Community and Human Services had somebody on the evaluation committee for the proposals that weighed in on that and kind of gave that perspective. And then we probably will do this presentation to those groups as well and get some input and feedback, but we've really just been kind of trying to get these contracts going and get this up and running. And we certainly plan to reach out to them and address it probably in the fall. Finalizing their.
Yeah, I'm going to help you with the Commission on Aging. I want to definitely help get you scheduled.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is really exciting. This is something that I have been very interested in for a long time. And I'm like, why are more people trying to fix these systems? Because every jurisdiction has to do it and nobody has a great system. And I think a memo came out from Metro recently. And as of this week, all the jurisdictions are now talking and having some conversations about things that we can do better. And the kind of the cost numbers came out. So
I think you go around and say to anybody, a single trip on Metro Access, $152, you're going to get there. You're going to get people's attention on that.
I remember when I first started my career, it was in New York and I heard that it was $75 a trip and their paratransit. I'm like, why is nobody looking into this? I don't understand. And you know, 15 years later, finally doing something about it, but it's exciting and I think it's a step in the right direction and hopefully it'll be good for our clients and you know, we'll just have better customer service and it's a win-win.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, do you have a quick question?
For you, it is news to me that we're over paratransit.
We are.
So for the past 8 years or whatever, what are the responsibilities we're supposed to have over paratransit?
We are over Dash, obviously, and have certain responsibilities. And that's primarily what we administer. We are also over all Metro bus service in the city. And that's, you know.
Do we have authority?
We are advisory. So basically we are basically, if council says, gosh, we need, so there's the Transportation Commission that does a lot of transportation policy stuff. And I think what they were trying to do was split some of just the feedback on like individual routes and kind of talking to riders, how you coordinate with Dash to us. But the bylaws simply say that we will be over Metro bus service in the city and we will be over paratransit as well. I don't know, I wasn't involved, I wasn't the chair at the time those changes were made, so I wasn't involved in those discussions, but it sounded like when I asked about it, they just said, we had no board in the city that actually oversaw this. And so we just said, it's you guys. And in fact, they even changed our name for a while. So we're ATC, Alexandria Transit Company. They changed, basically said we're gonna be known as Alexandria Transit Company when we're talking about Dash, and then we'll be called the Alexandria Transit Company, Alexandria Transit Company, the Alexandria Transportation Company, ATC, because we'll be like the group that oversees all the transit except rail. They didn't give us rail, but basically, and so our agendas for a while actually came out with like the city logo and the Dash logo on it at the same time, because they wanted to say that we were these two groups, but we never discussed it. And then eventually, I think the director of TNES turned over, and who had negotiated this, and it wasn't really a priority anymore.
So it was like Lonnie Rich counsel to that half of our.
It's technically, but what I wanted to do was just at least get us familiar with it, so we can then decide what do we want to do about it. And that's why I also asked the question about, there are other commissions that seem to have a lot of interest and expertise in this, and making sure, and it sounds like Tess is going to them and talking to them, and maybe out of those discussions they'll say, gosh, we want to be more involved in this, and and that can not just be our responsibility, but yeah, it's something.
Council should double our salary.
Well, as Hillary just told us, 2 times 0 is still 0.
Anyway, it's something we definitely, as we talk about a board, whatever we want to accomplish, especially with having put actually, Hillary has the agenda, and I see we still do put the 2 logos on. That was we still have the city logo on it as well. That was something that came out of that because we were overseeing city stuff as well. But anyway, it's something that we definitely should talk about as we think about what our goals and priorities are as we move past, the ATV that we've spent so much time on. And I think now we have an opportunity to think about where we want to have moments, and something I want to talk to all of you about during the summer, actually, to get your feedback on.
If we have a fiduciary responsibility to that as well, I'm concerned that we're neglecting that.
Well, I think it's an advisory responsibility. In that capacity, we're really more like, say, my commission on, Commission on Aging, I also serve on, it basically says the city, these are the needs of older adults, and this is what we think you should do, but it's more like, this is something that we can help council make decisions about things. So, yeah.
Okay.
But it's worth talking about. I was just, in the interest of time, I want to try to keep us on the agenda because I see it's already 7 o'clock. So Josh, I know you have a ridership update that you wanted to share. I think we covered the other items on your management report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try to be brief. First of all, it's good to see you all remotely. I apologize for not being there in person. I'll be transparent. I have COVID again. For anybody who's interested, I'm on the 6-month cycle. I made it 6 months from my first vaccine before I had Delta, made it another, actually 9 months after having that, and then having my booster, and now I have Omicron. I'll tell you, it is much, much, much more mild now. Very, very minor symptoms, but nonetheless, has prevented me from joining you for the last board meeting before recess. So there's a double whammy there, and I apologize for not being there. You did take the wind out of my sail in all these recognitions. I just want to echo what was said earlier, how proud I am of our team, of Jovan, and of our marketing communications team. Really spectacular. And I'm very proud that they were recipients of this and for the work that they do. I do have a little bit of additional good news that's not in the packet that I think I saved so that no one else could steal this from me. But I will say that we've had a lot of great media attention lately, and I just wanted to point out that that is an indication of the strength of our communications team and the work that they're doing, as well as the service that we're putting on the road. Is just very proud of them. We were recognized in the governing.com. They did a large article in which Councilman Aguirre spoke with them about our fare free service and our service changes. We also were sort of surprised to be recognized by a group that it's not small. I mean, they're feeding into USA Today and other entities, but 24/7 Wall Street, if you've never heard of them, I had to do a little research. They did actually recently rank us as the #1 small transit system, small city transit system in the country on their various metrics. So if you want to check that out, it is on our Twitter feed. I will issue a correction to what they published. They say that we have a light rail system. That is not true. unless it's hiding somewhere underground and I'm just not aware of it. But nonetheless, much of the other information they published, we're very proud of and happy to receive the recognition. We've covered the dashing words of motion. Just to want to thank that group and the attendees who came to speak and provide their messages this evening. We are really proud of that partnership and what they're doing. I'm covering some of the ridership updates tonight, but largely I will say that, as you can see here with the yellow line that is on the screen, our ridership continues to recover in a strong way, particularly thanks to the new network as well as our fare-free service. What I will note on, here's another slide that kind of compares it to how much service we have on the road in comparison to pre-COVID. We actually got up to close to about 95%, I believe, of pre-COVID ridership. And I want to point out that I think it's particularly relevant to look at the fact that we still don't have our morning commute back. We're still not seeing a lot of commuters in the peak morning hours. The afternoon hours seem to be strong, but the all-day service has been really, really well received and utilized in Alexandria. So this is a great thing to see. We're going to continue to look at this throughout the summer, and I'm sure Martin will be back in the fall with a more in-depth ridership analysis and some more data for anybody who is big into data. Before I toss it over to my colleague, Edward Ryder, I will mention that the board has 2 action items this evening. And for our new members, just to kind of understand the process here, we are at the very end of our TDP and budget process. According to the calendar of actions for the board, Edward will present to you the final budget, which is essentially taking what we had originally proposed early on, and we're talking early fall when this goes in to the city, and that submission went through the city manager's budget process, reviewed by council. Of course, we understand that council allocated additional funds for our line 30 expansion, which we remain very, very grateful for and are excited for to see in the coming year. So what Edward will present is a final wrap up for you to consider approval of, and that will lock in our budget. And then Martin will speak about the TDP, under which you have some decisions to make as to what option you select to go into the final TDP as adopted this evening. So if you have any clarification, I will be here, the little box on the screen. Feel free to let me know if you have questions for me, but I will now turn it over to Edward, if that is your will, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Josh. But we'll make Raymond answer the hard questions.
Fair, that's fine too.
Good evening. As Josh mentioned, this is the action item to approve the final budget. Page 13 of the packet has the full kind of summary of the budget. I did want to walk through some of the key implications and assumptions that this final budget has. This is the final year of our CBA, our collective bargaining agreement. And this does have the largest annual increases compared to the prior years of our CBA. Prior years had 1.5% increases. This is a 2.75% increase. So the budget has accounted for that in its, that increase is funded in this budget. All non-represented personnel who also follow pay scales have a corresponding similar increase as well. Second assumption in this budget is fuel costs. The budget goes in with a $2.40 assumption for gallon per diesel. This is the assumption that was made back in the fall, and at that time, that was a fairly conservative assumption based on what we've been seeing. Obviously, fuel costs have increased significantly since then. That's sort of, we're assuming that's something kind of outside of our control. So do want to point out that it is $2.40 is the price per gallon of diesel fuel. That is.
Edward, I wanted to ask a question, and Kendall, I think I want to get your input on this as well, because Josh and I had a conversation yesterday about the fuel costs, because obviously we know we're going to blow through that number, and as we're then going to be looking to the city perhaps for supplemental funds or having to try to move things from elsewhere, how did the city kind of adjust? Is this happening as the city has fleet management as well and trying to deal with the costs, and that expecting that next year is just they're going to have to put additional funds to departments that operate large fleets? Because I just want to make sure we're being consistent in how we presented our budget with what else is being done. And answer that.
It's a good question. That's really more on the budget side of the house, not the finance department. What I am doing is bailing departments out for 2022, not so much the 2023 side, but even for 2022, we've had to move money around other departments for things that were budgeted in non-D and not moved around, but we really didn't have, so in the city, if a department is going over for fuel, but it has savings on the vacancy side, then it kind of washes out. And unfortunately, in hiring is a challenge. So on the city side, we've been able to absorb a lot of cost increases in other places because of the turnover and the vacancies that we're seeing. So it all kind of washed itself out.
So
for 2022.
But so this would be like, it's like a department by, so like RPCA is handling this themselves when looking at also their staff vacancies. Okay, so it's kind of department by department.
Correct.
We're also in a position, we're also dealing with a ton of overtime because we have shortages. So the savings aren't going to materialize necessarily there unless there's a change in the labor market. But
and as far as I can talk to, not for FY23, but for FY22, I did talk to the new head of fleet services to kind of see what they were doing, and they sort of said, we don't, it was kind of the same boat we're in. It's, they didn't really have a way to project it, just other than, recognizing the, unpredictable increases in it. So
when you think about the 23 budget, they're doing current services back in the fall. And so that the budget kind of gets wheels and gets legs. And staff did not bring a technical adjustment to council for their consideration this spring to deal with the fuel side. What we do have is fund balance. And so if by some chance next year, and God forbid, this fuel stays at $5 a gallon for another year, then that's something we're going to have to look at and either do a supplemental appropriation or shift funds around from other savings, just like we're doing this year. So we'll all be keeping an eye on it.
All right. The next assumption or impact is advertising revenue. That does increase to $336K in the FY23 budget. It was $180K in the FY22, and as we've mentioned in prior board meetings, we're assuming we're going to reach about $100K, which is the contractual minimum. I will point out that I've been meeting with our advertising vendor, and they are seeing a large uptick in interest, and we're also looking at different ways to make ourselves more attractive to potential advertisers. So there has been a recent uptick, so I'm confident that we're seeing that interest increase, and so FY23 is looking more attractive than we have.
We're not changing we're not going to start wrapping the outside of buses. We were very adamant about that.
But
that's we're increasing that without doing those.
Yeah, there have been some questions from our advertising vendor of possible, not full bus wraps, but possible window wraps. That's something we said we would discuss for potentially future meetings with the board to see if there's interest in doing that. But just at our current, what we're doing, there's already an uptick in interested vendors in our current advertising capacity. Additional impact assumptions. I wanted to point out the I-395 commuter service grant, the service and the grant reimbursements continue on into FY23. I will point out that the cost for running that service, as well as the reimbursements, are not actually they're not put into our budget. This is the way that FY22 was done. FY23 follows that process, and the reason the cost for running that service is not in our budget is the idea is that the reimbursements will offset it. So essentially the net impact is zero. For future budgets, we may want to call that out separately of having 2 line items, but for FY '23, we wanted to follow the way we did it in FY '22. The final proposed budget does include, as mentioned, the staff supplemental and associated reductions, as well as the service, the funding for the service improvements along line 30. And the last assumption I wanted to highlight is the TRIP program, the Transit Ridership Incentive Program. That continues into FY '23 and into FY '24. The amount for FY '22 is 2.8 million, up from the 2.6 in FY '22. The total amount being 7.2 for the 3 years. I will point out that it was technically not in the original budget for FY '22, just because it had not been the recommendation had not been fully approved at the time of the FY '22 budget. And we do anticipate.
New guy question, is that the formal name for the free fare program?
So that is the Transit Ridership Incentive Program. The TRIP program is a state program to incentivize ridership through either free fares, reduced fares, and that's what we're using. We've been awarded that to help fund our.
Got it, thank you.
It doesn't fully fund it.
Not fully, it's a big job. It assists in funding.
Thank you.
So lastly, we anticipate this budget to be successful, with the exception of volatility in the fuel and labor markets. But outside of those, we anticipate this budget being successful. Here's the kind of the summarized budget as far as the revenue and the expenditures. As I mentioned, the board reports, page 13 has kind of full budget breakdown. So with that, I will turn it over for questions, or if you want to make a motion to approve.
So I just had one question. So the 28.3 million does not include the 4.7 from 395. So
That's
the actual cost to operate the system is more like 32, 33. So
That is correct, yeah. And also, my apologies, that should say FY, the 2022 budget on there, FY. Yeah.
Edward, can I just add that on Tuesday's council meeting, we'll be appropriating the grant, the TRIP grant that's on council's docket, and then that'll go to public hearing on Saturday. There's a whole section where we recognize either adjustments to grants that have happened or new grant money that's coming in. And then also we have a section in this supplemental appropriation ordinance that shifts that money around. So Dash is in the first section where the grants are, and then getting an additional 800,000 of general fund money to deal with the overage. That'll all happen next week.
All right, so we have to adopt the budget with the fiscal year starting July 1. And so I know for our brand new board members next year, you will get to see the whole process of how this develops. We start in October. And I want to thank staff for the outstanding job that they did, Edward, Josh, and your whole leadership team for putting this together and shepherding it through and ensuring that we continue to provide the service that we need to. So I'll ask if there's a motion to adopt the budget.
So moved.
Moved by Jesse, second, Matt. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, David, who moved and seconded?
Jesse moved, Matt second.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I'll just give a quick update on FY 2022. So we're approaching the year end. This is the year through April, because of the timing of the close process. May is not technically closed yet. So April has a year-to-date deficit of 3.6 million. The year-end projected deficit is just under 1.3 at 1.285, 1.286. That has come down a bit because of the application of the 395 commuter choice grants. I will point out that the March and April reimbursements were larger than forecast, as likely will be the May and June ones. The reason for that is a number of factors go into calculating kind of the multiplier for the reimbursements, and fuel costs have gone up. So by virtue of fuel costs going up, the multiplier has gone up. So those reimbursements have been a little larger than anticipated, which is why the year-end projected deficit has come down a bit. We are still keeping the same request from the city that we initially submitted for the SAO, just to be conservative and hedge against continued fuel price increases. Then the two largest factors that are budget overruns leading to that projected year-end deficit, those remain operations overtime, that's still a significant overage, and then fuel costs. As mentioned in previous meetings, our FY22 budget had $1.90 per gallon of diesel fuel. As of this morning, it is $5.10, which was over what we, in March, we started to project out at $5 a gallon because we were seeing $3.50 or so. And we thought 5 was conservative then. So as this mentions, that's 113% increase from what was in our budget.
And Edward, are the electric costs holding steady or are those going up too?
The electric costs have gone up, but not nearly as exponential.
Because I remember we have this plan where the more you use, the higher the rate, which I think is ridiculous. And the city should negotiate something with Dominion. But even at the highest rate, is it still being escalated, or do we have some sort of contractual agreement where it stays at a set rate?
That I don't know, but I'll have to look into that. That's
Good point.
all right. And then the last slide is just the summary of the year-to-date, month-to-date, and the projected year-end. And with that, I'll open up to any additional questions.
One question, just on the last slide, so the projected deficit for the year is 1 point something.
Just under 1.3.
But that is also because the trip money for FY22 was never programmed into the budget, so is that offsetting that?
That includes, that's adding the trip money into, like that's assuming the trip money is added into both what we anticipate getting. So even with the trip money, we'll have a 1.3 deficit.
Right, but if we didn't have the trip money, it would be less. The trip money is offsetting the actual deficit.
Yeah, if we didn't have the trip money, it would be a much larger deficit.
Just because we didn't put it in.
2.6 million. Because we did anticipate there being a deficit because of the fare free and I think it goes back to the original submission for the I-395 grants. So we knew there would be a deficit. The trip money was going to offset that, and then the overtime issue and then the fuel issue created a new deficit issue. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Martin Barnum, Director of Planning and Marketing for Dash. For this evening, we've got items 6A and 6B on the agenda, which both are related to the board's consideration of adoption for the FY23 Transit Development Plan. The materials in your packet begin on page 18. This is an action item for the board to consider adoption. For those that aren't familiar, the Transit Development Plan is our annual process through which we identify service improvements for the following fiscal year. In this case, it's FY23, which begins on July 1st. We started our process, started back in the fall with our budget process, but we came to the board in March to introduce the draft TDP document. And then we had a 7-week public outreach process. We came back to the board last month with the final TDP for your consideration. The feedback that we received was that the board had requested that staff do some additional analyses on the line 34 proposal, which was the subject of a lot of feedback from the community, a lot of concerns from the North Pitt Street community. So the board had asked that we provide some additional analysis on alternatives that might have a lesser impact, be less disruptive to that community, and to particularly focus on the new bus stop locations and the parking impact, any parking spaces that would need to be removed. So the memo that is in your packet provides that analysis that staff has completed over the last month. So we were coming back to ask for your consideration for approval of the TDP. And we are recommending an alternative option for the line 34, which is the Pendleton crossover identified as option 2 in your memo. Next slide, please, Josh. So I won't go too much into detail into the memo and the all the diagrams that were included in your packet. I'm happy to answer questions at the end, but I do want to provide an overview before we get to the open discussion. For this analysis, we identified 4 different alternatives.
that we were looking at for this line 34 alignment. The map that you see there is Old Town North. King Street is just out of the map to the bottom. And then the top is 2nd Street and Bashford Lane is just above it. So the 4 alternatives that we looked at, first was the original TDP proposal, which was the proposal to move the line 34 from North Fairfax Street to North Pitt Street. And that was the one that we had a lot of response from the community about. So we identified a couple alternatives, which are the 2 crossover options, options 2 and 3, shown in red and blue. The first of those 2 was identified by staff, the Pendleton crossover, which would allow us to serve the northern half of North Pitt Street by traveling via Pendleton Street to cross over. And we're able to serve that commercial area there without having buses on the southern half of Pitt Street near Queen, Princess, Orinoco Streets. So that's shown in red. The second crossover alternative is shown in blue. That's the Madison Montgomery crossover. This alternative was identified by the community, and I do want to thank I think most of them, but Mr. Murphy and the ad hoc group for their work. Doing a lot of analysis, extensive surveying to help kind of quantify some of the aspects of this. But this solution was identified by that group, Madison Montgomery, the crossover option where we would continue to serve the very northernmost part of North Pitt Street, those last few blocks, but stay on North Fairfax for the majority of this segment. So those are the 2 crossover options, and the 4th option shown here is just the existing line 34 alignment shown in orange, which just has us on North Fairfax Street all the way up to 2nd Street. And that's just what the route does today. And that's what we're trying to get away from a little bit because it's not particularly productive and a little bit redundant. So, and then I have a table there that kind of shows, there we go, that works. So here's a very detailed table. There's an easier version to read in your packet, but it tries to quantify some of the different criteria that we looked at with the focus on the bus stops and the parking removals. So you can see the numbers there. The 2 options that we were looking at, the main option that we're recommending is option 2, which is the Pendleton crossover. You can see that there would be 8 new bus stops with that option, and we would need to remove 6 parking spaces along the routing. You can see the net cost there, and then a number of other criteria: operational efficiency, safety, ridership impact. And we believe that considering some of the trade-offs and so that what we heard back from the community in terms of not wanting to have to be on Pitt Street all the way down to Cameron, we had identified Pendleton crossover as the best option. We believe that the Pendleton crossover will allow us to achieve most of the objectives that we were trying to accomplish. Some of the objectives set up by our vision plan to improve ridership, to provide more useful bus service in this part of town. It allows us to serve the denser parts of the Pitt Street community, including the 600 and 700 blocks. There's a better map on the first page of the memorandum in your packet, better than the one I have on here. It shows some of the locations of the grocery stores, for example, that are right there on at St. Asaph's and Pendleton, and just north of Wythe and Pitt. So you've got 2 grocery stores in there. You've got 450 new residential units in that 600, 700 block that would be served by this, not necessarily by the other crossover option. And then generally speaking, we also felt that this was a safe option. We did run a number of bus tests out there to make sure that the buses could safely operate there. And we felt that this was a safe and efficient option for us to pursue. So those are the main reasons we felt this was a good compromise. We also did an analysis of the comments that we received from the North Pitt Street community to assess where the concerned individuals were located and if they would still be impacted by this proposal. What we found, as you recall, we received over 80 comments from North Pitt Street last month that we shared with you. Of those 80, 57 identified their location, provided their address or the cross street. Of those 57, 47 were located south of Pendleton Street. So they would, so basically over 80% of people that provided comments would not have buses running in front of their houses per se. We recognize that there still might be impacts for those individuals. The corridor is related. So even if you have buses a couple blocks away, you may still have some impact. But we feel like it would be minimized by this proposal, and that it represents a good compromise between the different desires. So that's sort of an overview. I'm happy to dive into more detail on any of those items, but the staff recommendation is that the board adopt the TDP with the amended version of line 34, option 2, Pendleton crossover.
You just run through the bus stop locations on that option.
Sure, for option 2, yep. So you can see the map there. So we're talking about the red
red line, option 2, the Pendleton crossover. So as you can see, it would serve City Hall, the existing stops, run up North Fairfax Street, serve those existing stops all the way up to Pendleton, would turn left. It would serve 2 old stops that we used to serve on North Royal Street, or excuse me, not Royal Street, on Pendleton at North Royal Street. Those will be important for the residents of Annie B. Rose. That's why we want to reestablish those stops. So it'll be very close for them. And then we have potentially 2 stops at the intersection of Pendleton and Pitt. There's one of those is a new bulb out that was constructed as part of the Alexandria Florence development there. So we'll be able to serve that. And then we have 2 additional stops on White Street, which would be there to serve the grocery store and other residents in that area. And then the next stops are closer to Montgomery, so we have a bit of a gap there. And then that's kind of what we're proposing. Those are the 8 new stops that I mentioned.
That's helpful. So tonight we have to make a decision basically, and so 2 of you are new, and I don't know how much you had followed some of the prior community discussion that we had, but we have to decide basically, the staff will need to then take direction in the TDP and prepare for traffic and parking, because there are parking impacts if we do either the original proposal or the Pendleton crossover, and then to then begin to prepare for service sometime in the fall. So tonight is the night in which the board has to act. So I want to open this up and get your comments. I think staff has done a really good job trying to analyze and having come up with exploring every possible solution for this corridor and giving us information to go on as we make this decision. So folks, feel free.
Thank you for recognizing me, Chair. Martin, I want to say thank you for providing this great map. It was really easy to understand what the stops are, the different alternatives. So I thank you and staff for providing us with this additional information. I also want to say I really appreciate the compromise. At the last meeting, there were many folks who were concerned about the safety of adding bus service along their residential street. But I think this represents a really great compromise. I don't think Dash should have a policy that we would not have bus service along residential streets. Like that's just does not make any sense. It doesn't set a good precedent. However, we do want to make sure that the service that's provided is safe. And I think what you provided here as a compromise provides additional service along Pitt Street. It certainly hits the commercial parts of that corridor. I do think that I'm interested in hearing you talk about how the buses navigate areas where there is that double parking of delivery trucks and all that, because that's something that your drivers are professionals at, your experts at, and I just want to ask if you can share that with folks who are here just to alleviate those concerns. But I think this is a really great compromise, and I appreciate you taking the input and the concerns of the residents, but also maintaining Dash's priority to, one, reduce SOVs in the city, providing more equitable transit opportunities for people in the city, and also responding to the fact that we are an urban community and we need to provide alternative transportation for folks. And lastly, if there are no existing or not a high number of existing transit users on a corridor, that should not be a reason to not provide transit, because the access to transit may incentivize more people to try that mode of transportation in the future. So I think for all those reasons, I support this compromise, but I would like you to talk about that, the fear of having the buses when they're, Amazon buses, all that stuff happening on our streets.
Yeah, thank you very much for the comments and for the question. So to answer that, we did a lot of reconnaissance on this particular route. Many of these routes, all these routes, we went out there 5 or 6 times in the last 2 months. We've been out there with safety, our safety team members, our operations staff, and the like, and we've kind of gone on at different times of day. We've gone in the morning, we've gone in the afternoon. Haven't done the early morning and the evenings yet, but we feel like we've gotten a good sense of what the traffic operations are like in this area. So we're comfortable that we can make all the turns. We have good sight lines, those kinds of things. Assuming we have some of these partners, that is the caveat. In terms of the double parking, that sort, as you mentioned, our drivers are really well trained. They're professionals. They have to go through extensive training in different circumstances. And I don't think double parking is something they experience on a regular basis. I mean, you look at King Street in the morning, there's always trucks parked, and that's much narrower situation. So they're used to that kind of stuff, and they, if it gets to a point where they need to pause or wait for the truck to move or something like that, they're trained to handle that but they always operate with safety as their top priority. So they'll be able to handle those situations they encounter.
Why don't we just, and we'll go around then. Murat had your hand up, so we'll go kind of this way, and then we'll do Kendall as well.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the presentation, the recommendation. One thing I wanted to kind of understand a little bit better is the criteria that you used in your analysis. I think a couple slides ago, you were talking about the number of parking spaces and then, ridership, the impact on the efficiency and then safety, right? And many of the elements of those criteria are recoverable, right? Like efficiency is something that, or revenue loss and what have you. But when it comes to safety, then, there's always a red flag because there's the implications of safety or unsafe actions are usually not recoverable. Could you, if you have that information, could you talk a little bit more about how that safety assessment was developed? Was there, what were the elements? Like, was it a line of sight, pedestrian volumes, number of ingress, egress points, or curb cuts, lane widths, traffic control? Like, was that like a comprehensive assessment there, or was it more like, turn radii is appropriate? So maybe, do you mind, like, if you have that information?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
The reason, I'm sorry, let me back up. But the reason that I'm asking is, like, it is not the safest option, obviously, the recommended options, right? So I want to understand what the compromise is.
Sure. And yeah, thank you again for the question. So it is what you described. It's a comprehensive assessment. When we go out, we take the buses out, we take a 40-foot bus, different models. We take out worst buses in terms of turning radius to simulate what the worst conditions would be. So we do that. We do it many times in different conditions and just kind of identify hazards. We kind of take notes as we go, take pictures, take videos, and kind of where are the trouble spots. Kind of at a high level, I would just say that usually straight bus routes are safer. The turns are where a lot of the challenges come in, especially in Old Town. So that's kind of one of the reasons why Pitt Street was a little bit, in terms of the stars, we don't have it up on the screen, but I think the Pitt Street option 1 was 4 stars versus this option is 3 stars. So a slight downgrade because the turn a little bit tougher, but we still feel confident that they can do. And I think that there's always going to be kind of different considerations, different trade-offs. But I don't think that this is the trade-off to where we're compromising safety. I think we're comfortable with this option. Our safety team has reviewed it, and they believe that we can operate this safely. So.
I largely want to yes and Brandy's comments about sort of commending you guys for taking public feedback, finding a compromise that sort of still got at the aims and objectives that Dash was doing in this service redesign, but also was responsive to the community. Sort of to the chair's comments about the importance of thinking about how we engage in public comment. Like, I think that's all really productive. The one observation I wanted to make is a lot of our assumptions about these routes are sort of based on how everyone has always engaged with Dash, which was when it used to cost money, when people largely used it for inter-neighborhood service or for commuting. And one of the things that I just want to observe is something that I have seen in my own neighborhood, which is people are starting to use it for very short intra-neighborhood trips because it is essentially hop on, hop off service at this point. Residents could get on it on one end of Pitt and go to Trader Joe's. And in a way that that didn't used to make sense because of the money, because of the timing. But now as you see the bus going by, you can just go on. And I've seen some school children in Delray, like literally will get on, they'll ride 3 blocks and they'll get off because that is something the service can do now. So I actually think this notion, to Brandy's point, of the buses being on our residential streets, I actually think that is a significant feature, not something that we should be looking to excessively mitigate. So I really, and also just, the long-term plan in general, I think was really commendable. So.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's a great point about being able to hop on, hop off, especially with these grocery stores on right off the route. If you got your hands full of groceries, you're not able to find a fare, your smart trip card, your app or whatever, or you walk right on. So thank you.
Yeah, I echo Brandy's comments as well. I appreciate all the work that you guys did, taking the feedback from the community and also from the board at our last meeting to look at these different options. I am supportive of the compromise because you did influence the process with the residents' feedback. So I appreciate all the work that you did. So thank you.
So I echo what Brandy said with ridership in the residential areas. I also think there was a false argument of, these buses are gonna drive all by my house all the time and they're gonna stop. But the fact is, if they're saying no one's gonna ride it, they're not gonna stop. I mean, this isn't like Metro where it always stops at a stop.
Well, they're also saying it's gonna stop because we have four-way stops at every intersection, so you'd still get the.
Right, but the
braking
issue is there are
of the
people coming on and people coming off,
Yeah.
but so that doesn't bother me. My question really is, there are two compromises here. And there's a 2-block difference between 2 and 3. And that stretch between 2 and 3, the compromise is really a congested area. I mean, it's Trader Joe's. You've got Harris Teeter, you've got people walking near that liquor store that's getting robbed all the time. I think that's the worst spot to be on Pitt Street. So the fact that we have existing routes going between Madison and Montgomery, the 2 blue routes, that would be my preference. My question to you is, what is the advantage in potential ridership and what are the costs of moving it just those 2 blocks north?
Sure, yeah, thank you for the question. So yeah, a couple things that it kind of gave us led us to recommend the option 2 over the option 3 there. First, I think it's really important. I mean, you've mentioned that there's a lot of activity in that 2-block stretch of Pitt Street north of Pendleton. As we mentioned, 2 grocery stores, Harris Teeter, Trader Joe's. You've also got, as I mentioned, 450 new residential units, a little more density there. And then you're just a block away from St. Asaph's, which has a lot of activity on its own with shopping and there's a couple office buildings in there. So you're gaining a lot by starting on Pitt Street a little bit further south than you would otherwise. So I think that that's really at the core of this question, is being able to serve those blocks. With the blue option 3, those are one-way streets, Madison and Montgomery. So the way the stop's set up, if you're coming, if you're going northbound, the closest stop you're going to get is going to be north of Montgomery. So if you're trying to get down to the Trader Joe's, the Harris Teeter, you're going to have to walk a fair amount. You're not just walking to Madison because that's not where that direction stops. So from a walking standpoint, it is a long walk up there.
How long?
2 blocks there, 3
Okay,
blocks.
I mean, but the part of the whole change was people would be required to walk longer. Certainly in the West End, that's nothing. I mean, they don't get 2-block service in the West End. My other final question, Martin, is just in terms of the one-way streets, it's faster. Were you able to time the difference between going up Pendleton, getting to say Montgomery, going that way versus just going up North Fairfax and then going to Montgomery and ultimately meeting up with Pitt again?
We didn't do start a stopwatch. Based on our observations, we believe it's about a wash.
Okay, I mean, I take your word on that. It just seems so much more congested. Plus Pendleton's a 2-way street versus the 2 one-way streets with 2 lanes going in east and west. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it may be slightly faster. I mean, that would make sense. I think it just that from our perspective, we think that the gains of serving that section are just really the whole point of what we're doing. We think that that's where the ridership is going to be. That's where all these 400, 500 units are coming in. And you've got, the existing, if you go on Madison Montgomery, you're still redundant to lines 30 and 31, as you mentioned. So you're not gaining much. You really, I mean, that's kind of why we felt that at that point, you're basically bringing the route down 2 blocks. We prefer to keep it on North Fairfax.
But that, again, that gets to the priority that we set as a board to prioritize frequency over ridership coverage, right? So it sort of goes against the stated goals that we developed in 2018. That's.
So I do want to push back. I know we talked about that.
Sure.
Is that concept is talking about routes over a long period where you have common origin and destination points. So we're talking about a short period here where you can't coordinate the routes. It's not like you can have offsetting routes or offsetting frequencies. So you got a trip arriving every 5 minutes or something like that. So you're not going to gain a benefit there. You're also not going to have very many people that are going, from basically Cameron Street up to Madison, Montgomery. And I mean, will be a few, but I mean, their needs are very well met by the 30 to 31. Also, I'd note that with our, the city funding the line 30 improvements during the peaks, we're now gonna have even better service on North Fairfax Street. Basically 5 minute service during the peak period. So there's plenty of service on North Fairfax Street. This is just entirely redundant to that. And that's why we don't think it makes sense.
Would there be a chance of our own buses creating a backup if it went straight down Fairfax to Madison? Just because of that frequency?
No. I don't think
Okay.
we do that.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, a couple of things. So thanks for putting all this together. And it was a lot of work, and I appreciate, going out and actually testing the routes with the drivers. And echo a lot of what Brandy said. I think I appreciate your explanation about the safety, because I think some of what we heard from the community was about a different type of safety, a personal safety feeling at the stops. And I think that's a perceived concern. I don't know that we have data to back that up, but I think safety of the turning buses is a real concern. So I know you talked about the stops on Pendleton, but to Miss Moser's point, that does seem like a lot of stops in a very close range. You have 3 stops in each direction within 2 blocks. Is there a way to reduce that number of stops and consolidate and potentially, if you were to do that, are there certain ones that would potentially save parking? Because as I think of head of the traffic and parking board and the discussion that we're all going to be having, at that point about these routes, I just wonder your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I was glad that Ms. Mosher raised it. We agree that the stop spacing here is not what we would normally be looking for, especially in an urban environment. The reason that we had to do this is because it's kind of in order to serve this effectively, we felt like we had to stop these places. Removing the only stops that we could remove from those 6 stops that would save parking are the ones on White, which is kind of the north of Pendleton there. And the reason that we opted not to do that is because the next stop heading up from the southbound direction is up at basically 2nd Street. And you can see kind of the topmost blue circle there. So it's a big gap. It'd be basically a 4-block gap between the next southbound stop and the preceding southbound stop. So a really big gap there. And yeah, so we really wouldn't, if we took away some of these, we really wouldn't be saving parking. Most of the parking, especially at Pendleton, needs to be removed because of the bus turning and not because of the bus stop. So like I said, for the one on Pendleton at Royal, in the middle there, that's for Annie B. Rose. That's a senior facility. We want to make sure that we have closed service for them. They have another stop at their front doorstep over on Fairfax Street. We want to kind of get as close to them as we can, given some of the challenges they might face getting to the farther away bus stop. And then the one at Pendleton Pit, we had to remove the spaces for the turn movements. We also have that bulb out, which is has a nice bench. It's a nice place to wait for the bus. And you've got that Alexandria Florence, which is 286 units or so, right there on the corner. So we did have that there. We could consider removing these, but we just wanted to show the worst case scenario.
So there's no way of having a stop if you move the width to Madison?
That would
A little
require
closer?
more parking removals. There'd be more parking removals required there. So we could remove an extra 2 spaces and have the stops there.
I mean, it just. And maybe that becomes a discussion for the traffic and parking board then, because I think spacing out the stops makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I guess we need.
We could conceivably remove the Pitt and Pendleton stops. Those are the closest to the Trader Joe's, so you have to walk a little further. That would be the logical one, that's in the middle, so you get your stop spacing a little bit better.
But Trader Joe's is kind of in the middle of that block at St. Asaph, so it's equidistant to come out and.
The corner is
go to
right, the southeast corner of Pendleton City. That's the entrance, so it's a block away from our stop.
You took away the Pitt and Pendleton was designed to be a bus stop. Originally, when we had the AT3 coming up Pendleton, you actually would not be serving the intersection that was specifically designed to be one.
Unfortunately, that one was designed for buses going through.
Right. I know, but it's still yeah, it was designed actually, because when they planned that building, we had a bus that went up Pendleton to Braddock. And so that's why the turning issue is there, because they put the bulb out, because they said, well, the bus is just going straight, but nonetheless, there's a bench and a pedestrian enhancements there that are meant to help people get across the street to get to the bus stop at that intersection. I always thought that was a good point. That was something that really bode well for this compromise, because I hate to see bus stops that are designed and never used. And that was, but it was the timing of when that project was approved.
That was actually a grant project that we did for the bulldog came later.
Oh, I assumed it was with the Florence, because it was constructed as part of that, when the bus barn went away.
The one at Pitt.
That Pendleton and Pitt, yeah. Because if you take away the Royal one, then you do lose, I mean, the folks at Ladre and Annie B. Rose do have very close service on the 30 and 31, but I think, yeah, to the point that then you are giving them another option without them having to cross the street to get to, that they could walk very close to their building. And I believe there were some modifications to the sidewalk there, at least in terms of having a landing pad. We didn't take away the parking, but there is a landing pad, at least on the northbound side of the street that exists.
Talking about on Pendleton.
Yeah, on Pendleton Road. The stop that is right in front of Annie B. Rose has at least has a concrete pad there where the bus would stop. Although we're leaving, and you originally, because you and I talked about this a month ago, there was originally, I thought, 6 spaces. We were able to engineer, is it by moving the stop back 5 to 10 feet that we engineered that down the number of spaces?
We're still at 6 spaces for option 2. Are you talking about?
It's the entirety, but I thought originally it was 6 in that block where the bus had to turn at Pendleton. So maybe I had misunderstood when we had spoken very early on, but.
Yeah, I think there's 3 that are needed there.
Okay.
That's the most significant impact is at that intersection.
Just a quick question. If we adopt this, are we also agreeing to the locations of the bus stops or just the alignment? Tonight.
That's a good question.
So staff can modify. We don't often get into, is there going to be a bus stop here? Is there going to be a bus stop there? I actually lost the bus stop closest to my house, and I'm still angry at Martin about that. So my word, the board apparently has no authority over sitting where the bus stops are. My poor pit in King Street, gone forever. But anyway, yeah. So we would be per the alignment, but I think we would be giving staff the discretion basically to come and continue to refine this proposal, because there'll have to be discussions with the city for the traffic and parking board presentation. So yeah, that's not set in stone, but I think what I'm gathering is a concept that you feel comfortable with, but subject to some modification based then on feedback. Of course, if traffic and parking doesn't approve spaces in some places, we have to figure out, can we still do this, or do we have to go back to essentially what would probably then just be leaving on Fairfax? So yeah, so that motion doesn't have to include that. I apologize, Kendall is still with us, or did she leave? Because I wanted to give her a chance to weigh in, and I don't see her on the screen anymore.
I believe that she had to sign off.
Okay, well, she's okay. She may have had to go, but we can continue to discuss this.
Another question. So 30 and 31 both terminate or they go to Braddock Road Metro, right? And 34 goes to, Potomac Yards, right? So wouldn't it be more logical just to have one of 30 or 31 loop up and take the alternative approach? So people can then have more of a choice where they want to ultimately end up. Because under this approach, people who may live on Fairfax will have a tougher time north of Pendleton getting to Potomac Yards, right?
Right, that's not something they're able to do today. So.
Right, but if 34 were just going on all the way to Fairfax, then they would be able to just hop on without having to walk the blocks.
Right.
So was that considered as well, the removal potential of service to 34?
You're saying realign the 30 or 31.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we would not, that's not something we necessarily consider. We would not want to split up the 30 and 31 because they are designed to work together. And if you split up their routing in a significant way, they will not be able to be offset such that they're arriving every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes or whatever it is. I think if we had to go up that far, it would throw off the timing. And I think, especially along Madison, Montgomery, you've got a lot of development there. You want to make sure you have both routes through there. I mean, it's kind of the other side of the coin of the other discussion that we had about the frequency. We've got these.
No, it absolutely is. Okay. Are we gonna vote?
Well,
each option? or
No,
how
I
are
mean,
we
so the
gonna do
goal would
this?
be to basically have a motion that says what option would be included for this. The rest of the TDP was largely settled. We were waiting to find out if council would approve supplemental funds for any of our additions. So we got money for the 30, so that's in there now. The rest of it is all really something that we've all decided on. So really, this was the piece, because we could have actually voted on the TDP last month. We were still asking staff to refine this. I mean, I'll just say for myself, in terms of my views, I do favor the compromise. I think it is very responsive to a lot of the feedback that we heard about the southern half of Pitt Street, and trying really to be a good neighbor and to balance what was the purpose of doing this, and to serve the new development and the activity centers along Pitt Street. And so I wanted to make sure that we could do that, and also to serve the folks in that section of Pendleton Street also are used to having transit, because that was there before. We do have to manage and educate about the potential parking reductions that Traffic and Parking Board will have to weigh in as part of this. But I think this really does accomplish some things. This route is mostly I see Kendall's back, so I'll recognize you after I'm done speaking for your views. I do think that you know, this route is going to change a little bit as we now align to Potomac Yard, and Potomac Yard builds up as well. This is our lowest performing route in the system right now, so it's kind of hard to look at it today and see the potential of what it could do. But I think having that alignment along another activity center that's growing, I think is very important. And I think it's something that as we try to balance how we operate our service. And Randy, I think your comments were spot on, and your background as a planner really shows. And as you spoke to us about really the value of what we do and where we provide our transit, I agree with you wholeheartedly. You said it very well. Kendall, you get to be last.
Hey, first let me apologize. I have interns this summer, and we've learned if one of the air conditioners upstairs is on and somebody runs the microwave, we blow a fuse, and we're learning about fuses and which ones to touch and which ones not. So we're back in order now.
Quite a day today.
It's unbelievable. I don't want to belabor this, because I really think staff did a spectacular job kind of taking feedback and pivoting and being agile. And I mean, as a city employee, I think it's really impressive when we're able to do that. And
Somebody plugged the microwave back in.
She was going to be present like that. Well, oh dear. All right, well, I think we got the gist of what you said, so we'll see if she comes back on. But is there further discussion about this? And certainly to questions for staff, and let me also just then make sure we all understand the process, because I know we have community members here who also want to understand what happens from here. So in terms of the timing of the traffic, and so we would act contingent on Traffic and Parking Board approval of the space removal. Do we have an idea of when that would go to Traffic and Parking Board? How far along are we in discussions?
We did present to the Traffic and Parking Board kind of a preliminary heads up on this. I guess that was back in April or May, just to let them know that this was being discussed. So you know, I have to work with the city staff to get on the agenda. I assume they take a break over the summer, right? So it'd be July. I mean, they don't meet in July.
We are meeting in July.
Oh, you are meeting in July, okay.
And not August.
Okay, so I mean, at the latest, maybe September, we'd be looking at the implementation with this would be coinciding with the Potomac Yard Metro. It's not just which is not scheduled to November, December. So we have a little time.
Kendall, you're back. Did you want to say anything further? We thought you blew another fuse, but
no, I don't know what's going on. I'm good. I'm happy.
So Traffic and Parking Board then would have to approve the proposal. There'll be a hearing, so there'll be opportunity for residents or anyone who's affected to speak either for or against the proposal. They would just be weighing in on the parking aspect of this proposal, not the overall transit connectivity, which is really our jurisdiction. Josh and I went into the bylaws because we wanted to look and just make sure we were clear, because I had gotten a question actually from a neighbor of mine about this proposal, about what is City Council's role here. So City Council are the stockholders of our corporation. We are a private nonprofit corporation chartered specifically because council wanted to kind of have some separation from the day-to-day management of the transit system. What the bylaws state is that the stockholders can up to 15, we would notify the stockholders of an approved change, which we would do after Traffic and Parking Board has approved this. And then they have basically can say, yeah, we want to talk about this, and they can call a stockholders meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company if they wanted to overrule this. I do not believe that council has ever taken such action or reviewed a service change in the 38 years that Dash has existed. But to questions of anyone who wants to understand, is this going to city council? They can choose if they want to upon being notified. They can do so up until the 15th day before the service change takes effect. So that would be the process, but otherwise it would not come back to us. If traffic and parking board approves it, the goal would be final approval tonight. It would come back to us only if we need to modify the proposal as a result of what they did. Anything staff wants to clarify about the process or?
Yeah, I would just add that even if the traffic and parking board makes their recommendations to the director of TNES when it comes to parking removal. So if they denied it, but he thought it was the right thing to do, that it's ultimately his decision, and then that decision can also be appealed. But I would just make that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. So I think we're all clear on what happens from here. Does anyone want to make a motion on the TDP?
Mr. Chair.
Just a minute, you have to say which option.
Well, that's the motion will include, you'd have to say which option. So, and again, when the motion's on the table, if there's somebody disagrees with that, let's keep talking.
But it will be defined with what motion, which option.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So.
Correct. Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the FY 2023 TDP with option 2 for the Pitt Street routing.
All right, so we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, so we'll call Hillary. So, were you going to say something?
Yes, just a potential amendment, because I think it would be helpful to everything that Jesse said, but also, and maybe we would want to do this in a separate motion, but that the board is making a recommendation to the traffic and parking board to support any parking removal that allows for the alignment that we're adopting. Because going to the traffic and parking board, we can, provide that.
Yes.
That recommendation.
And our board will probably have to speak at that. Whoever representative board will have to speak at that hearing. So is that a friendly amendment that you said? Accepted. So a motion, a second. Is there further discussion on did you want to discuss this further, Matt, or?
No, I'll just say for the record, I think option 3 in the 2 or 3 block difference is not justified, and I will not be supporting the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? And I respect, and Matt, I respect that. I think to your point also about just like an Old Town and also being a resident of Old Town, I am so fortunate to know that I can walk out my door and have transit that's so close by the West End. There are so many obstacles sometimes to getting to some of those routes because of just the way we design roads. And so, appreciate and the understanding that, that in terms of the change, in terms of just somebody's access to transit isn't going to be completely altered as a result of doing one or the other. But I think, staff is, to me and to others, it seemed to make a persuasive case that we get some benefits from it.
And I think it prioritizes people in Old Town over in the West and in the West End where there's less service, but that's not even my reason. So anyway, I just think it's a lot of effort for a little extra push for 3 blocks or 2 blocks. So anyway.
Well, I appreciate,
and I appreciate the work you did, Martin, as well. So.
Does anybody else wish to weigh in before we vote? Okay, if not, I'll call for the vote. So all in favor of the motion on the table for approving the TDP with option 2 and the amendment specifically that we endorse the necessary parking removals. And let me just ask, Madam Secretary, you have the motion, right?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Do I win a prize? No.
Okay, that's a no. Any abstentions? All right, passes 9. No, we're not 9. How many are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. All right, thank you. All right, we have an executive session to wrap up the agenda tonight. Let me just go back up to the agenda and see. I'm to announce that the next scheduled meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors is Wednesday, September 14th. So is there a motion to convene an executive session?
Mr. Chair, I, Matt Harris, hereby move that the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing legal and personnel matters pursuant to section 2.2-3711, paren A1 of the Code of Virginia.
Thank you, Matt. Is there a second?
Second.
Randy? All in favor? Aye.
Aye. No.
You gotta say nay.
Nay.
Like 1776, you gotta pound your walking stick on it.